Well, hello there to all the good people of Ohio and beyond. This is Aaron Knapp, and you're tuned into Unplugged, broadcasting without permission. This is a place where the truth gets louder and we dig deeper, and where we always remember be lawful, not awful. If you want the full stories, the documents, the videos, and everything they don't want you to see, head on over to Aaron Knapp, unplugged.com, my new home for every investigation, every episode, and every update. And while you're here, be sure to like the video, follow the page, and hit subscribe, and share this with someone who needs the truth. We're building something real here. We're building something fearless, and we're doing it together. Welcome to Unplugged. Let's kick this thing off.
Plug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Nap. Yeah, we
I'm just
noise, no script, no leash, no
I'm just throwing some links out there real quick.
We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Nap. Yeah.
All right, hey, good evening there, Lorain, Ohio, and beyond. Everyone out there in the world, welcome to Unplugged with Aaron Knapp. I'd like to welcome you guys here tonight, and I want to thank you for tuning in. That's right, folks, I'm out here doing all the best that I can to present you with the news that is the news. And so tonight, we're going to get into our whole story. Now, as I posted online, we're going to talk about a lot of things tonight. We're going to address a lot of different issues. We're going to roll through a lot of different things. And hopefully by the end of it all, we're going to have this thing squared away. So we're going to start out with segment one and what we call the McCann contract and the taxpayer shield. So we're going to start out with the story of James McCann's legal defense, right? And we're going to go over this throughout the podcast a few times, but it's about a system that treats power as a shared inheritance, not a responsibility, right? So when the City of Lorain chose to use public money to fund McCann's private legal defense in the federal civil rights case of Knapp v. City of Lorain et al., and they also did it for Levac, it wasn't just bureaucratic negligence, right? It was actually a calculated display of institutional solidarity, one that should deeply concern every resident of this county. Now, I get it. A lot of you don't agree with me, or you do, but we're going to go over this story tonight. We're going to get down to basics, right? McCann, the former police chief, is being sued in his personal capacity for alleged retaliatory conduct and civil rights violations, and these are not run-of-the-mill workplace disputes, right? There's serious allegations involving constitutional abuses, the kind of claims that strike at the heart of public trust. Now, he retired in September, well before the contract was approved. And the suit that I filed alleges that he, as an individual, under 42 U.S.C. 1983, not as a city employee, right? Not as chief police, carrying out municipal duties, because what he did was not that he actually did this as a vendetta. And that makes it personal, and that takes away the city's responsibility in that area. Yet, despite that clear distinction, the city of Lorain awarded him $5,000 in taxpayer-funded legal defense. And Levesque. Think about that. That's your money. They won't spend $6,600 on storage fees for transparency in their video files, but they'll do it for this. So the Board of Control, that vote that approved Rosenbaum's contract, and that's the lawyer, by the way, for McCann. Some other guy, Patchich or something, is like the lawyer for Levesque. But the Board of Control that voted to approve that contract included none other than Mayor Jack Bradley and Safety Service Director Ray Carrion. Now, interestingly enough, both those people are named as defendants in that same lawsuit. That's a problem. So let's say that again. Public officials who are being sued as individuals, right? Not as public officials, for violating civil rights, voted to authorize Ray Carrion and Jack Bradley, Mayor and Safety Service Director, voted to authorize taxpayer money, your money, taxpayer money, for their co-defendants, private legal counsel. Their co-defendants, private legal counsel, folks. Not only is that deeply problematic, right? It appears to definitively and directly violate Ohio Revised Code 102.03D and E. They both forbid public officials from authorizing benefits in cases where their impartiality could reasonably be questioned, right? There's no recusal, no independent review, no competitive sourcing, just not in vote. Now, the city never explained why its law department couldn't represent McCann. I know why. It's because they're conflicted as hell, because they're all involved up in my shit, too. They're, like, buried so deep in my asshole, you'd think they were, like, I don't know, a piece of corn stuck up there or something. But there's no public documentation showing that McCann's actions were ever even within the scope of public duties or his former duties. Typically, municipal legal representation hinges on that scope of duty review, right? They have to do a formal determination that his alleged actions occurred as part of the official's public job. Now, in this case, no such review was ever made available. The city never disclosed any legal memorandum justifying the expense. It just said, approve it, silently and without scrutiny. Now, the key fact here is the mayor and Mr. Carrion both are the only people in the city with the authority to do that, up to a certain amount of dollars. I think it's like, Karen knows, I think it's like 50 grand or whatever, but maybe it's only 25. I don't know. They can approve 5,000 for sure without city council ever having to worry about it. No one would have ever seen it if Garen hadn't posted it and I hadn't seen what Garen posted, because he looks at that stuff for me. What's more troubling, though, is the person selected to receive this no bid contract, right, is none other than the famous Jonathan Rosenbaum. Rosenbaum, he is no stranger to controversy, right? He's the former prosecutor who pursued the Head Start case against Nancy Smith and Joseph Allen. And that case was built on suspect testimony and was kind of devoid of all physical evidence. But hey, that case unraveled after decades of litigation, leading to Smith's eventual exoneration, right? She's been exonerated. Say what you want, but she has. Rosenbaum has never conceded fault. He's never acknowledged the prosecutorial overreach. He's never faced institutional discipline. And now, years later, he's back in the legal spotlight. Not as a prosecutor, but as a taxpayer-funded defense attorney for a city official accused of civil rights violations who no longer works for the city. Rosenbaum's appointment is not incidental, right? It reflects this deliberate decision to shield institutional actors from familiar and politically safe hands. So the optics are damning. A former prosecutor with a history of aggressively defending the status quo, Rosenbaum, is now chosen to represent a former police chief in a lawsuit that threatens to expose deep systematic failures. His proximity to the political figures like Bradley, Carrion, Rosenbaum should have triggered these ethical safeguards. But in Lorain County, familiarity is a protection, folks. It's what you expect. Old ties become new contacts and contracts. Old roles become new shields. The message to the public is unmistakable, folks. It's when power is at risk, the system will close ranks. It will not explain. It will not recuse. It will not review. It will protect Rosenbaum's return. And under these conditions, it is not a redemption arc, right? It's a reminder that Lorain's legal and political circles remain tightly wound, where loyalty often outweighs merit and silence is more valuable than scrutiny. And the use of public funds, in this case and others, is more than just an ethical lapse. It's a structural failing, one that illustrates how public institutions in Lorain and Lorain County continue to operate in this fog of selective transparency, right? Where decisions are made quietly, contracts are awarded strategically, and accountability is almost always deferred to the next guy. Until that changes, every vote like this one is not just a line item on a budget, right? It's a symptom of a culture that the public sees public money not as a trust, right? But as a tool to be used not for justice, but for insulation. Now, in our next segment, the conspiracy of silence, who really took down J.D. Tomlinson, right? We're going to talk about if the public had been told that J.D. Tomlinson left the prosecutor's office because of an internal scandal. They've been handed a hollow narrative, right? What they haven't been told is what the headlines never really fully traced. It's the deeper architecture behind his fall. The pattern of who was left behind, who remained, who stayed quiet, and who has continued to hold power after J.D. Tomlinson's departure speaks volumes, folks. And it's in those silences that the real story begins to unfold. And with that, we're going to have our first little quick break. So please stand by for our station identification and ad. Hey there, folks. If you really want to know what's happening in your hometown, the place to go is Lorain Daily and Vermilion Daily. From city council and school boards to local businesses, community events, and neighborhood stories, these outlets cover what the big media ignores. This is hyper-local news for real people in real communities. Visit Lorain Daily and VermilionDaily.com today. Read it, share it, support local journalism, because your community deserves coverage that actually lives here. Hey there, folks. If you really want to know what's happening in your hometown, here. All right, folks. Thanks for sticking around for that little quick ad break. All right, we're back up. Now let's talk about who didn't leave. You guys. Thanks. None of these people are paid sponsors. Most of these people are people I respect, admire, or I'm friends with that I want to show possible ad sponsors at some point that this is possible. They can come here and advertise if I get that big, which I'm not saying I will. But, you know, when people say, oh, he's doing it for the likes, well, aren't we all? You know, I don't know. Anyway, what's the point in speaking if no one's listening? Well, let's talk about who didn't leave, right? Besides you guys. Dan Petticord, he didn't leave. Or most of the staff in the prosecutor's office, they didn't leave. But Dan Petticord is still drawing a public paycheck. So if most of the internal staff who advised on and facilitated the controversial Battistelli settlement, Petticord himself was once chief assistant APA, right? Chief assistant prosecutor. He now holds this administrative role at Lorain County Jobs and Family Services, where he's among those behind the scenes, right? He's shaping the very settlement that would later haunt Tomlinson, though, when he was in his original job. He was helping frame its structure while simultaneously engaging in its internal discussions that shielded it from Corsa, the county's insurance consortium, and he was still there when that fallout began, still in standing, still employed, actually running for office as a judge. Now, so why is it that Tomlinson, JD, everybody thinks, no, listen, really quick. I know it's been expressed to me that JD himself and others, maybe even in his family, think I hate JD. I have never told anyone in this world I hate any of you people. I don't hate anyone. I especially don't hate JD. I don't hate his family. I don't hate Tia. I don't hate Aiden. Look what I did recently with Aiden, and I flipped. Like, you guys have to understand anything. I can be taught. I will be educated. I only know one set of circumstances, then that's all I'm going to deal with. I'm not going to move forward beyond that. I only act on the knowledge I know. So once I meet with, someone like Amber and she gives me more information, I start to look more into other areas. I had no reason to look into any of these people with Tomlinson. Now, I will say this much. Before Amber came along, I was like, okay. I kept asking my attorney, like, I didn't know Amber, but I kept asking him, why did everyone stay? Like, if Tomlinson's a Democrat and he staffs this office, and I get it, it's a small town, right? 120,000 county, well, I guess in the Lorain, Elyria area. But in the towns, like, it's 50, 60,000 people. Maybe there's not a lot of lawyers. Maybe there's not a lot of people that want those jobs, but everyone stayed? Come on. The one on the left was Dan. And honestly, all of my sources said the reason why they put Dan where they put him was because he knows where all the bodies are buried. They want to keep him under that same Gambora something, Gambara, Pecora, whatever, law firm that protects the county. I don't know. I'm definitely wrong on those names, so don't pay attention to those, but that's the idea. He's definitely being put back into the fold to be protected is what they're saying. They're saying to me. And by they, I mean my sources. I'm not saying this is fact. I'm just saying that's... And that's why simultaneously engaging in these internal discussions and shielding it from Corsa and still being employed is problematic. So with all of that, then why is J.D. Tomlinson the one official who actually finally acted on the Nancy Smith case? Now, I know, guys, look, I was banging Tomlinson like nobody's business. I get it. Like, as Amber would put it, yes, I get it. You're hurt by this, and this, and he didn't do this. But you also have to recognize he was going through a lot then. I didn't. I don't. I wouldn't. I do now. I see it now because I'm researching it. But in the moment, a phone call would alleviate that. Communication. We talk about that all the time with people. Communicate. Let people know what you're doing. So why is it that Tomlinson, the one official who acted on this Nancy Smith case, right? I didn't look into it at the time. I didn't look in the Ohio 4. I was just kind of scratching on it. And people who dislike me were scratching on. I don't want to steal their thunder or their stories. I don't want to go after people in that way. I want to address the news. I want to address what we know. I don't want... Look, even if you are someone I'm talking about online, I don't dislike you. I'm just addressing what I see as the facts. We can figure it all out together, and at the end of the day, come up with a conclusion. But again, Tomlinson, he's become this lightning rod for institutional blame. Everyone says it's him. And I joined in on that. I discussed that earlier, and why I discussed it. But now I can't help but see that he's the lightning rod. I mean, why is it that when the media frenzy started, it was only JD's name in the marquee? Could it be Satan? I'm just kidding. That a prosecutor willing to unwind the office's most haunting legacy had become politically inconvenient. Is that what happened with JD? I mean, could that be what you guys are missing in all of this? Is that they don't realize that JD did something so fucking crazy in their minds that they couldn't see beyond it. I didn't know anything about this fucking case. I was like, oh, what? So why would I see what he did as something amazing? But again, I hadn't seen it yet. My initial reporting on all this wasn't as a reporter. It was as Aaron, the guy who was mad at the prosecutor for not responding to me because I was mad at Resendez and I was mad at Burge. Resendez first, Burge later because of what he wrote. Never really JD, but sure. The people I was hanging with, they hated him. All of them did. Not one person was short on jumping on JD when I'd bring him up. So, of course, in the moment, I probably got caught up in it. But, all that leads to is
emotional damage.
So, that's why his success in overturning a case riddled with constitutional concerns has drawn the ire of those who built their whole careers defending that same prosecution, right? Because they did. You think about that, folks. I don't know about that. I had to look it up. So Rosenbaum, Jack Bradley, all these names that keep floating up. Montalon, these different detectives, these different, Cel Rivera, Amber Smith, aka Amber Bronish, Nancy Smith, aka the woman who got totally screwed, Joseph. I mean, listen, nobody wants to talk about him. The black man that everybody trashed. We talk about the white lady, and I appreciate that because she got screwed just as bad as he did. What about Joseph Allen? That man had to leave. I mean, I've read this stuff. Anybody that reads this stuff, if you have even 2 brain cells, you read it and go, what in the absolute fuck did y'all do? Cell knew it. That's why he gave the recorder to Amber. But now, much to my well, listen, I can't say JD wouldn't have been a good prosecutor at this point because I don't know anymore what I know. I do know this. I know that I didn't want JD as prosecutor and Resendez as sheriff because I don't think Resendez is a quality human being in everything that he's done. I feel like while he may be and have done great things in his career, I feel like he, like many others in this town, in this city, in this county, have allowed themselves to be influenced by the powers that be, right? You look at, everyone in Hall's campaign knew about Drinky Winky and all these other things. They were sending me so much information. Again, how do you think I learned about Coonrad? So I'm getting all this knowledge from inside the campaign. And everyone's treating me like a god. They walk up to me at these events or shaking my hand. I'm overwhelmed by this. But enter Tony Sillo, a man with long institutional ties. He's publicly challenged the exoneration of Nancy Smith, right? The fact that Sillo did this. Sillo's 2025 motion to vacate the court's prior ruling was framed as procedural correction, right? But it felt like something else. It really felt like a warning shot across the bow. It was a signal to others in the building that rocking this boat, revisiting the past, or undermining old guard narratives will come at a cost to you, your career, and your life. Because make no mistake, Sillo was not some rogue actor, right? His decision to challenge Smith's exoneration, it dovetails with a broader pattern. It's a movement to reclaim control of the county's legacy and its legal legacy, right? To reassert that the system never errs. We didn't do nothing wrong. We can't because we can't. And those that say otherwise, from wrongfully convicted defendants to reform-minded prosecutors like JD, to me, to Garen, to anyone that questions this verdict, to Amber herself, to even the Madhouse podcasters and Tucker who interviewed JD after Joe Rogan did. Now, honestly, if I'm JD's attorney, I would have told him to shut the fuck up and never go on Joe Rogan. But hindsight's 2020. As a journalist, I love it. It gives me lots of information. There was some bad stuff in there, but there was a lot of good stuff in there. But I mean, in the end, he did do the right thing. My initial feeling was he did pick and choose. I feel like he knew what was coming with the Battistelli stuff. That doesn't mean he wasn't set up. That doesn't mean that this wasn't a plan. But it also means he's strategizing on the go from a defensive standpoint. And if you're always making these decisions from a defensive standpoint, your decisions are always going to be questionable. They were coming at him from day one. I see that now because I've requested all the documents and they finally given them to me. I'm not afraid to ask. I'm not afraid to be wrong. I'm not afraid to be right. I'm not afraid to put my neck out there. So when people come at me like Tia Hilton or Angel Arroyo or even Tucker, these people that are scared of what I bring, I don't care. You guys don't matter that way to me. You can't. The truth will set us all free. Be mad at me, but I promise you in the end, we're going to get to the end and everyone's going to be happy. Whether or not your guys are innocent or guilty, whether or not their guys are innocent or guilty, whether or not anyone's innocent or guilty. All I know is that we're going to get to the bottom of it. We're going to find out the truth because that's all that fucking matters. It doesn't matter if JD was wrong. or right. It doesn't matter if Silla's wrong or right, Hall's wrong or right, Tucker's wrong or right, Angel's wrong or right, Aaron's wrong or right, Amber's wrong or right, Garen's wrong or right, Mayor Bradley's wrong or right. None of this shit matters. Wrong or right, these are all just our words, our opinions. It doesn't matter. Because all of us at some point will find ourselves marginalized, discredited, or quietly removed when we no longer fit the narrative that overall the county needs from us or the city, right? In their mind, the organization matters. The weak links can go. Eventually, someone like Jack Hall or Jack Bradley will be removed because he's expendable. And he's at the end of his term. He's no longer politically useful. He can't just go back to being and lawyer Jack Bradley. He's developed all these other aspects of his life. Then you got somebody like Jack Hall, a reserve sheriff who was propelled into the spotlight by the people around him as the sheriff. People like me. And he associated himself with the Republicans and people like Silla. And they carried him to the top. I didn't know Silla's involvement with the AG. I didn't know he used to work for the AG. Again, all these things are being educated to me, but I listen. If somebody comes to me and says, well, F you, Aaron, you said this, this, and this about JD, but hear this. Da, 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 da. So copy, paste, research. Oh, they're right. JD did do this. JD did do that. So what's that teach you folks? That research is good, learning is good, and it's not wrong to be wrong. Actually, being wrong is one of the most human things you can be. It's a beautiful thing, right? Because it allows you to correct your frigging course. And it's a movement to reclaim your control of your legacy, to reassert that, even though you err, you can be better. So, in the grand scheme of things, look at the timing. Just as Tomlinson was pushed out, right? Those who helped him, who helped shape the circumstances around his alleged missteps, are suddenly rewarded with continued employment, silence from leadership, and contracts that never see the light of day. I mean, ever. Like just as Rosenbaum handed the city contract under questionable conditions, the same networks that kept Smith case alive and for decades are reinvigorated. It's not a coincidence, folks. It's orchestration. And the institutions play along. The commissioner's office, the law departments, and even parts of the judiciary. None of these people ask the obvious questions like, why were the public funds used for a payout that circumvented insurance review in the Battistelli case? It doesn't matter who did it, because to be honest, like the more I look at it, the more I think one person had his hands all over it, and only one person, which was Dan Petticord. And he was the go-between. Who's at fault? I don't know. Jennifer, whoever controlled Jennifer, whatever. I do know that the people that I'm supposedly irking were in control of not only his campaign, but somebody else's, that they're highly connected political people that I'm supposed to be afraid of. But why were internal emails contradicting the public narrative of that whole settlement never scrutinized? Why was Dan Petticord, whose fingerprints were all over this shit, both the creation and the defense of the payout, right? He made the payout happen and he defended it. And nobody ever asked that question, like, why was he on both sides of that fence? He helped craft it and then helped defend it. That's the best place to be. Because these were not oversights, right? These were tactical omissions. Hey, one person. Y'all need to share this shit. Am I not excited enough for you? Do I need to bring out a puppet? Anyway, if you think that this is about partisan politics, think again, folks. It's about institutional preservation and about loyalty to power rather than truth. It's about an ecosystem of public officials who understand the survival comes from not from integrity, but from compliance. Sorry, I mean, this is going to be a long one anyway, so it's okay. They'll come back. It's going to raise the question that hangs over every inch of this story. So it's the question that Amber's made me ask and others have made me ask. And I'll admit, I didn't want to listen to it when the Madhouse podcast had JD on there, because the Madhouse podcast has recast me as the villain in the story of somebody because of their regulars doing something for them that they shouldn't have done. Again, you can question all you want whether I deserved it or not, but that's why I didn't watch it. So JD Tomlinson, was he removed because he violated the law or because he disputed this long-standing culture of unaccountability? Was his fault orchestrated partly through me as a weapon, not because he failed, but because he succeeded? Maybe it's because he dared to ask the one thing that he shouldn't have asked, whether the institution he served was capable of even making good decisions about a reckoning of their own history, right? Maybe JD became the scapegoat because when a man is punished not for his misconduct, but for attempting reform, it's not a scandal, it's a coup. And Lorain County's owed an explanation by far. We are. Not from the man who left, though, JD, but from those who stayed behind. I have to ask, why is his staff all still here? Everyone. Why is JD gone and the outcast now? That's a good question. I think it's a legitimate question that deserves answering. Why is they still care about him other than that decision? So that brings us to segment 3, the obsession, the shift, and the lesson of self-education. And to truly understand how this story evolved, we have to talk about the year that it changed everything. And I think it was the 2022 election, or maybe it was in 21. I don't know. Anyway, it wasn't just a political contest in Lorain County. It was a proxy war over who would control the narrative about truth, power, and justice. Oh, wait, no, that wasn't the 22 election. So it's 25 now, 24, like 23, 24. Anyway, the last election, not the one, I guess it was 22 because the last election, I don't know, 22, 23, the one where Hall was running, not the one where I was running. It gets so confused in my head. But it was a proxy war over who would control the narrative about truth, power, justice, and the American way, right? And I wasn't just a reporter on the sidelines, right? I wasn't even a reporter at all at this point. I was knee deep in it. And for a time, I couldn't see the whole board. It wasn't until I began looking at the Nancy Smith case and the politics around it that I was aligned with many voices of the in the old guard before that. I spoke often with Silo and I worked closely with Jack Hall, always. At the time, both men were unified in their opposition to Prosecutor J.D. Tomlinson, honestly. And to be honest, so was I. We all shared a belief that something shady had gone on in that settlement and that the public had been misled. That doesn't mean that it was JD. It could have been Petticord. It could have been anyone in that system. It could have been the people I was aligned with pushing that through Petticord. It could have been, Dave Moore, Republican, pushing that through Petticord, supposed Democrat, through to JD, who, when Petticord actually ran the whole settlement. I don't know. It all seems a little hinky to me, but hey, I pushed that story as much as the next guy did, and I pushed it hard. I filed the records request. I got the Barilo Rosenbaum, everything. I have all the paperwork, which really questions why Rosenbaum could be allowed to represent McCann, considering how much anyway. But I wrote like someone who believed in the truth that I had, and I had it by the tail. What I didn't realize then, and what I only became clear later, is that, well, obsession can become blinding, right? And that's what it was. Not reason, legal disagreement, not a good faith dispute about the facts. It was an obsession, an unrelenting fixation on discrediting Tomlinson. One that consumed Hall, one that still consumes Silo, and seems to feed conversations that began to feel less like legal analysis and more like political targeting. Every email, every document, every story that was shaped around a single premise. Tomlinson's got to go. And I was caught up in that shit. It wasn't until, much later, after I was only in my own shit, that I met Amber Brownish, who I later found out was Amber Smith, someone whose questions didn't quite align with either faction, right? And I started to feel that the ground shifted beneath me. Amber wasn't trying to score political points. She wasn't invested in any political or party personalities. She was invested in patterns, and she had also been digging through the public records, but her questions cut deeper into her mom's case. And why were certain payouts structured in ways that bypassed oversight? Why were some attorneys hired without process while others were sidelined? Why were politically connected figures always in the room when the doors were closed? These questions, they sat with me, right? They wouldn't leave me alone. They dug at me. They picked at me. And so when I went back to the records, I went deeper. I reread every email I've ever received and every email anyone's ever sent me and every email chain, all the stuff Jack sent me, all the stuff Hall sent me, Solo sent me, everyone sent me, Jack Bradley, anything. I tracked every campaign finance report. I pulled every version of the contracts and requisition forms tied to the Battistelli payment. I have the entire files. I have the Rosenbaum, filings, everything, and the city's legal maneuvering. I have it all. I got it all. I have an entire file full of all of the depositions of everything that was done. And what I saw was not just one-sided scandal. It wasn't. What I saw was a system of mutual protection, a framework where the old guard and that politics weren't really just surviving. They were thriving, right? Where a public resource, public resources were redirected, not for our benefit, the public, but to shield the insiders of the political mechanism and machine. Where ethical walls meant to separate public duty from private loyalty had all but eroded. The most damning of all that I saw was that I had missed it. I let the proximity to one side of the fight limit my vision. That realization was hard. All right, I'm gonna admit it. But it was necessary. Because journalism that never evolves is just noise. And the duty of any investigator, or any journalist, or any person who claims to care about the truth, right, is not to protect their prior assumptions or their truths. It's to always test them consistently, constantly, relentlessly, especially when they begin to sound convenient, right? The moment that I stepped back from the City Hall orbit and looked, I saw that the campaign to remove Tomlinson wasn't about a single settlement. It was more about power. It was about restoring a version of Lorain County where inconvenient prosecutors were pushed aside, where hard questions were punished, and where institutional memory could be rewritten in favor of those who never wanted the change to begin with. And that's where Amber and her mom's case matters. That's where the Smith case comes in, right? That's why Rosenbaum's contract matters. That's why who stays and who goes inside the county government matters. That's because none of these moments are isolated. They are all part of a system that protects itself by keeping people confused, divided, and focused on the wrong villains. And if there's one lesson I've learned through all this, is that self-education is the most radical act you can commit in this whole thing. You have to be willing to follow records past your own opinions and your own fucking nose. You have to be prepared to question your own reporting, your own answers, your own everything. You have to dig beyond the surface, because in a system where everyone is spinning, only the documents don't lie. And sometimes even they get manipulated. The truth isn't easy, folks, but it's always there. It's buried in the PDFs, the meeting minutes, and in the procurement logs, the campaign donations. And once you learn to read them, like me, like Garen, like others, not just skim them, not just quote them, but really fucking read them, dig in, that is when the story actually changes. And so do you, folks. You will. Again, we're at 38 minutes, folks. I'm telling you, we're at segment 4, and I'm pretty sure I've got like 13 segments, so it's going to be a long night. I'm letting you know. And if you don't stay to the end, that's fine. These will be put out later. This is going to be live, and then it's going to be recorded. It's going to be on the website. So you don't have to stay to the end. But I am going to run my podcast as I do. I'm going to run ads. I'm going to do what I do, because that's where we're at today in today's society. Yes, as Tucker would say, I am doing some of this for likes. I do want likes. I do want your opinions. I do want you guys to come and click, add, and subscribe. I want you to have your friends click, add, and subscribe. Obviously, I do. I don't want to speak to just no one. And I definitely want to speak to the people of Lorain. And I want you to understand I'm not Democrat or Republican when it comes to my reporting. On both sides. So when we get to segment 4, it's going to be Petticord's mini hats, the machinery of the influence. And we're going to get into that just shortly, right after I run this next ad from one of our sponsors. Here at Unplugged with Aaron Knapp, we like to thank our sponsors. We have a few unofficial sponsors tonight, and they are definitely not paid sponsorships. I want to throw out there a big thank you to Joseph Jones and Eric Jones of the Lorain Daily and the Vermilion Daily. They have a local news page. You should check them out. They do plenty of great work broadcasting all the news that is the news that you want to have in Lorain and Lorain County. So check them out. Also, please, if you need any legal services, feel free to reach out to Robert Gargas. You can find him listed online. He's a fine attorney and comes highly recommended by yours truly. And last but not least, I want to mention D&C Radio. Please make sure you check out one of the up-and-coming internet hip-hop stations and all of their shows. They put on a lot of shows. You have the Never Outdone show. You also have the Eric Bowen show, Speak Up, Speak Out. So please make sure you guys check them out as well if you're looking for your latest and up-to-date hip-hop artistry. Thank you for tuning in. This has been a non-paid sponsorship brought to you by Unplugged with. All right, guys, welcome back. So we're going to talk about Rosenbaum here. And we're going to go on from Rosenbaum to the next. So if Rosenbaum is the face of Lorain County's prosecutorial legacy, then Dan Petticord himself would be the quiet hand behind the curtain. He's not a name most of you would recognize, right? But in the grand scheme of things, that's exactly why his story matters. Petticord has operated for years in the gray space, this between legal advice and institutional strategy. Lorain County, and in this county, that space is where power is preserved. Petticord served as the APA, the chief assistant prosecutor, during the period when Battistelli's settlement was pushed through the county's board of commissioners. That payout, as I've reported multiple times extensively and others, was structured in a way that avoided public transparency. It was processed as a contractual expense, not a legal settlement, meaning it was bypassed the whole insurance review. Taught me a lot about the way I actually file. And limited public scrutiny. It buried any admission of liability, and emails and requisition metadata shows a lot of last minute changes, curious timing, and a broader effect to sidestep formal oversight, right? It was Petticord who, based on all the available records, appears to advise the whole structure of the Battistelli agreement, right? He didn't put his name on the vote, but he was all over everything. He advised Tomlinson on how to hide it. Then he advised the commissioners to pass it. Like the only one consistent is Petticord. Not JD, not the commissioners. Not Moore, not anyone but Petticord. Petticord's there. He didn't put his name on the vote. He didn't sign the check, but his fingerprints are all over it. I mean, his fingerprints are on that freaking check like a pedophile is on a kid. Like, at the time, he worked directly with the Board of Commissioners, with Dave Moore, with Jeff Riddell. His job was to provide them legal counsel, tell them basically what to do. Say, yeah, that's legal, that's not legal, right? And by all indications, he did exactly that. He was a counsel that enabled a payout to a politically connected employee and his boss's girlfriend while minimizing public accountability. It was a strategic maneuver. But was it legal? Was it ethical? Was it transparent? That kind of remains unresolved, folks. Like, what's clear is that the structure benefited from the system more than the public. And the person shaping it still remained behind the scenes, Dan Petticord. And that's where it kind of takes a twist. Not long after the payout went through, Petticord shows up again, right? After JD loses the election. Look, I'm sorry. Okay. Should have called. this time no longer inside the prosecutor's office. Dan Petticord answers from his email, his new work email, but he's representing the county interest in litigation involving, the very, records. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. This is a different side. So then later, he's actually dealing with the litigation involving the very records he once helped shield. Specifically, he was involved in the efforts to oppose the release of the settlement documents tied to Tom Barilla in a case where public access was at stake, and the commissioners fought to keep any key details hidden about the Tomlinson settlement or the Battistelli settlement honestly, we should just call it the Petticord settlement because he's the one that fixed it. And before that, we had this, whole matter of Rosenbaum representing Barilla in the whole matter of the records. And I just, all these names are everywhere, right? And they all have a peculiar way of aligning with convenience. So now Petticord holds this administrative post at the Lorain County Job and Family Services. He's still a public employee. He's still on the payroll. He's still involved with everything. And if not in the front curtain, he's actually just off the stage. He's like the Wizard of Oz, that pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, right? The legacy of his advice, the structural choices that helped implement and continued access, it echoes across the county government. Petticord is everywhere. And there's the problem with power that hides in plain sight, right? It's not always the headline names like J.D. Tomlinson or Tony Silla who shape the outcomes. It's these institutional attorneys, the ones giving advice to Jeff Riddell, county commissioner, long after they're no longer allowed to. They're the legal strategists, the people who know exactly how the system works because they've been in it. They've navigated. Hell, most of the time they've set the rules of the game. That's like asking the guys that invented Monopoly to play you at Monopoly and then arguing about the rules, about free parking with them. But whatever, that's how the system works and how people tend to move within it without triggering alarms. And that's what makes Petticord's role so concerning. It's not just mobility between functions, it's absence of any meaningful guardrails around it. One day he's a prosecutor, the next he's external counsel, no revolving door issues, right? The next day he's departmental administrator. And at no point does any public inquiry into these transitions raise any sort of ethical flags. Everyone's like, oh, that's fine. Well, he's running for judge, and supposedly JD gave him permission. JD shouldn't have. I'm sorry, that was one of the things that pissed me off, is that you gave Petticord permission to run and you shouldn't have been given permission. But now that I see where you were at, I get why. You just wanted these people out of your life, out of your hair, out of your fade. At no point has there been any inquiry into whether these transitions raise ethical flags. At no point has there been a review of the conflicts they might create. And all while the system benefits from this quiet continuity. What's that tell you or us? It tells us that the structures of government in Lorain County are not built for this disruption. They're built for preservation. The same hands that guide the process across years and across roles, and when questions emerge and answers dissolve into a flag of procedural ambiguity. It tells us that legal strategy has become the mechanism for managing perception in Lorain County rather than ensuring accountability. And most of all, it tells us that without transparency, the machinery of influence keeps turning and turning and turning quietly, efficiently, and always just slightly without our reach. That brings us to segment 5, my case against the City of Lorain and the anatomy of a conflict, right? The next part's kind of personal because I'm not just a journalist reporting on institutional misconduct in Lorain County. I'm the plaintiff in a federal civil rights lawsuit, Nat B. Lorain, City of Lorain et al. And what I'm about to do is walk you through it, not in theory, but it's documented fact. It's the autonomy of the local government using public resources to protect itself from public accountability. It's what happens when officials blur the lines between the office they hold and the interest they want to shield, right? So when we get to that next section, but before we do that, I'm going to do a quick break because we're doing 12 sections here. So we're going to do a quick break in between each section that kind of focuses on one very specific thing. So this one's going to be about voting, folks. And this one's going to be not about voting, actually. It's going to be about going to your city council meetings. Your city council meetings in Lorain are on Mondays and they're on Fridays. And so I have a little quick ad here Mondays, every first and third Monday of the month. Monday and Friday is the commissioner meeting. So We're going to talk about Lorain City Council meetings, why you should go and how you should go. So, real quick sponsorship ad about Lorain City Council meetings and making sure you go to represent your. Hey there, folks. Aaron here at Unplugged with Aaron Knapp. I want to give you a quick reminder for everyone watching that the City of Lorain holds its regular City Council meetings on the first and third Monday of every month. And those meetings are not just for council members. They are for residents. If you care about what happens in your city, and if you speak or want to speak on an issue, ask a question, or simply be present and informed, showing up matters. Participation matters. Even sitting in the room and listening matters. You do not need to be an expert on any of this. You do not need permission to care. You do not need to do anything other than just show up. So check the agenda, folks. Mark your calendar. And if something affects your neighborhood, your family, or your future, take a seat, raise your hand, and make your voice part of the record. Lorain City Council, first and third Monday. Your city, your meetings. Those council meetings start at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and they're held inside of City Hall. Make sure you attend this Monday's meeting. Hey there, folks. Eric. Alrighty, guys. Welcome back here to Unplugged with Aaron Knapp. We're going to begin with the lawsuit itself, right? That's the defendants in my case, include the City of Lorain, and several of its officials in their personal capacities, right? Meaning that they are being sued not for actions taken in their professional roles on behalf of the city, but for actions they allegedly violated constitutional rights under color of law. And that's important because this distinction is critical. When someone is sued in their personal capacity under 42 U.S.C. 1983, they are not entitled to automatic taxpayer-funded representation unless very specific criteria and legal thresholds are met, right? And that's what happened here in Lorain, actually defied those boundaries. The city's Board of Control, which includes your mayor, Jack Bradley, and Safety Service Director, Ray Carrion, voted recently to authorize $5,000 in legal services and contracts for former Chief James McCann. And then they offered another $5,000 for Joseph Levesque, the Assistant Law Director. Both these men are personal defendants. They're personally named, not professionally named, as defendants in my lawsuit. Neither is, one of them is, McCann's not a city employee. He retired. But Levesque is a contractor. I don't know if he's a contractor, just straight employee, but he works as police legal counsel. And yet the city has approved taxpayer money to pay for their private legal defense, even though neither one of them should be allotted that because they're being personally, not, business-wise sued. Now, there's no independent review of this charge because the mayor can sign off on whatever he wants below a certain amount of money, but no ethics board signed off, no third-party legal opinion clarifying whether these qualified for city-paid defense, right? The law department didn't weigh in. What there was instead was a vote by two officials who themselves are defendants in the same lawsuit. That's where it gets weird. Let that sink in, folks. Mayor Bradley, and Ray Carrion, our Safety Service Director, both are named as co-defendants alongside McCann and Levesque in that very same lawsuit, right? And they use city authority to fund the legal defense of their fellow co-defendants. That's not just questionable, right? That's not just a questionable act of political solidarity. That is a decision that appears to violate Ohio Revised Code 102.03D, which states that no public official shall use their position to secure anything of value that can improperly benefit themselves or others. It also raises serious concerns under subsection E, which prohibits public officials from participating in matters where their objectivity may reasonably be questioned. Now, that's not some obscure technicality, folks. The law's clear. When a public official is directly involved in a matter that implicates their own legal exposure, they are expected to recuse. That didn't happen here. No recusal, no deliberation about their the ethics of approving taxpayer money for your personal co-defendants in a matter, to provide defendants, lawyers to these defendants who are your co-defendants, which could affect the way you're seen in this case. Just as a business as usual vote, right? Mayor Bradley and Ray Carrion, it's like, whatever, fuck it, not our money. Logged as city minutes as if it were routine. But it's not routine. It wasn't extraordinary. I mean, actually was kind of extraordinary, right? But not in a good way, kind of in a bad way. Like, the city has also never explained why it bypassed its own law department, or why there were no documented scope of duty reviews for either McCann or Levesque. Typically, when a city decides to do this or to defend any current or former employee, it must first determine whether the alleged allegations or actions were within the scope of their official duties. That review is essential. It's the line between public liability and private misconduct. But in this case, no such review was provided to the public. No legal memo was issued and no justification offered, because I asked. And this is where the names matter, right? McCann was represented now by none other than Mr. Jonathan Rosenbaum, the same prosecutor who led the Head Start case against Nancy Smith, the same Rosenbaum with deep ties to Lorraine's political establishment. Levesque's attorney, also secured through public funds, is out of Cleveland. I don't know what his ties are. I didn't really look too deep into him. His name doesn't pop up a lot. I do know that he got mad at the city for trying to ask for his social security number, his partner's social security number, all this other stuff. It was like, look, we don't work in Lorain. Like, Lorain was trying to strong arm their own attorneys into giving the social security number and paying taxes in Lorain just to work in Lorain to defend Lorain people that they shouldn't have been defended to begin with. But he was secure with city funds too. Both men, one man retired before the lawsuit even moved forward, because McCann retired in September. And the second one is our current, I guess, legal director of police affairs. Yet both were insulated with public money authorized by their own co-defendants. And again, it doesn't matter if they work or don't work for us. It matters that they're being sued personally. That'd be like if you were driving down the street and you ran somebody down and then you got sued personally for it. And then they also said, well, we're going to sue your job. Well, I wasn't even at work. So that's not legal due process. That's institutional self-protection masquerading as public duty, right? And it tells you something fundamental about how city government works in Lorain. Not how it says it works, right? But how it actually works. It tells you that when a civil rights lawsuit threatens to peel back the layers of political favoritism, those in power will close ranks, right? They don't seek transparency. They will not ask the tough legal questions. They will insulate each other quietly and efficiently in a way that, using the very resources that are accused of being misused, they're saying are being misused. My case itself is not about what happened to me. It's about how the city responds when it's called to answer for its own actions. So far, the response has been silence, procedural evasion, and taxpayer-funded legal maneuvering. It should alarm every resident who actually believes public money is supposed to serve the public interest. It should concern every advocate for good government who understands that conflict of interest is not a gray area. It's actually a red flag. And it should kind of raise questions that cannot be answered with silence or secrecy. And so that brings us to the next section. Next up, we're going to review how the same web of political insulation stretches from Lorain County, to the prosecutor's office, to the courthouse, how that fallout from the Smith case continues to reverberate through and across generations of local leadership. And that's going to bring us to the fallout. Like, what happens after the reformer's gone, after J&E's gone? So when Prosecutor J.D. Tomlinson left office, it wasn't a scandal. It wasn't with the scandal, right? It wasn't criminal charges or public disgrace. It was with silence. Deafening strategic silence. And that silence is precisely what should worry anyone who believes that these institutions should be accountable to the people they serve, us, the public. Because when you look at it, what followed wasn't just quiet exit. It was an orchestrated reshuffling that left the old guard intact and made Tomlinson the only casualty of a systematic reckoning long overdue. Let's start with the bizarre and unprecedented move by current prosecutor Sillo to vacate the 2022 ruling. I think it was 22 or 21 ruling that cleared Nancy Smith and Joseph Allen, right? On paper, it's a motion for legal clarity. In reality, it's institutional act of vengeance. Because, make no mistake, it's not about the law. It's about power. Solo, who never led an effort to correct the record in the decades following Smith's conviction, now wants to actually reverse the one meaningful step towards justice that the office has ever taken. Why? Why, you might ask? Well, because it wasn't his step. Because it came from JD. And in the politics of Lorain County's courthouse, nothing's more threatening than someone who dares to right a wrong the system was built to preserve, right? And yet, while Tomlinson's gone bye-bye, the machine around him still remains. Dan Petticord still got a job and draws a county paycheck. He works over in Job and Family Services, right? Staffers who helped execute Tomlinson's policies, Zamba, Pluto, Prue, they all remain comfortably employed, unscathed, even as the man that brought accountability to their doorstep, J.D. Tomlinson, has been erased from institutional memory. That kind of selective fallout tells you everything you need to know. Reformers are disposable and gatekeepers are protected. That's especially galling considering how quickly the narrative was rewritten, right? The very people who enabled decades of silence on the Smith case now want to paint Tomlinson as the reckless one, as politically unstable. It's projection at its finest, folks. It's gaslighting. Because the truth is, Tomlinson did what none of them had the balls to do. Oh, I'm sorry, I was supposed to say courage. He forced this legal system to look at itself and go, hey, you're fucking ugly. And the moment he did that, the knives came out, right? Not just from inside his own office, but from a network of political actors, some with robes, some with gavels, some with keys to boards or control meetings, some who have built their careers on avoiding the hand and the hard questions, some who work within the music industry, some who worked on his case. I mean, again, where do you think? I mean, look, you guys can be mad at me for mentioning the Campanas or what? Campana. So you have Battistelli and Campana on one case. I mean, one election case before JD. And then you have Campana and Battistelli apparently running JD's election campaign. I don't know these people. I get it. You guys want me to be all scared. Oh, you mentioned PC Campana or music Campana. So what are they going to do? They're going to hunt me down? I don't have anything to take. You guys have taken everything. Why? By you guys, I mean McCann in the city. So I'm just reporting the news, folks. So what? Is that why the Chronicle always avoids any questions that are hard? They're all scared. Why should I be scared of the truth? Why should you be scared of the truth? Why is telling the truth problematic to you people? I don't know. Not everybody, but some of you. But here's where it gets personal, right? I saw it all up close. During the election, I found myself caught in the current of this bizarre, obsessive campaign. I was working with Jack Hall, and Hall and Silla were united not by a vision, but by a singular goal. Stop JD, stop Rich, stop the Dems, everything. Every conversation, every rumor, every whisper in the clerk's office or in the courthouse steps always circled back to Rich or JD. It wasn't until I met Amber that and continued my own research, right? Which I've done a lot of, right? It's not just her. But she does make me look at some people like the Madhouse podcast with a different light. Doesn't mean I don't tell my story still. I mean, again, he can be mad as he wants about what I say about Santa Claus. I'm not saying it about him. And Gito's not his employee, and he jumped off his podcast. The video clearly shows him standing by. He even admitted his own family was mad that he stood by while I got my ass beat. So none of that's untruthful. I'm just telling the story. I'm not saying, say I'm sorry, right? I'm not saying Aaron wasn't wrong for being in your bar. I should have known better. You're right. I shouldn't have gone to a bar that was going to overserve me and allow people to beat me down and then not call anyone when I was beat down. I shouldn't have. It's my fault. I was wrong. I admit that. My bad. But this is the whole problem, is that our current system is allergic to sunlight, right? And that's why this segment matters, because it's not about what happened to JD. It's about what happened to, it's about what his removal allowed to continue to survive, right? The same attorneys in his office, the same power brokers, the same political choreography. Petticord, for instance, wore multiple hats. Once counseling the commissioners about transparency, and then defending Barilla's but that wasn't him. Then defending his actions to insist that talking to Jeff Riddell when he was no longer counsel to Jeff Riddell was okay. And that's not resume, that's strategy, and that's kind of scary. And in Lorain County, we don't retire bad ideas. We recycle them and we reuse them. The McCann contract and the Battistelli settlement, Rosenbaum's reappointment, none of these are isolated events. They're warnings. They're signals of warnings. They're proof that reformers will always face more scrutiny than the systems they're trying to fix. But hey, here's the thing, folks. Silence only works when no one's paying attention. This platform, this story, this work, that's how we break the silence. That's how we make sure that next time somebody like Tomlinson walks into the prosecutor's office, they don't do it alone. They do it with the full weight of the public record, the full weight of public awareness, and the full weight of the public demand behind them. If you elected him, you should have supported him. I wasn't around when he got elected. But because the Lorain County deserves a justice system that defends the innocent and not just the powerful folks. It's up to us to make sure that happens. Not JD, us, the people. You want to put it on them. You want to put it on even on Silo. It's not their problem. We should elect people that are going to make it their problem. Coming up in our next part, we're going to talk about how that pattern of insulation and selective punishment has shaped my own case against the City of Lorain, and how that contract approved behind closed doors could change the way that we think about public accountability here in Ohio and in Lorain and everywhere, right? We're going to get into the personal stakes and public questions about my case against the City of Lorain. And we're going to talk about when I first filed Nat v. City of Lorain et al. It wasn't about a lawsuit. It was about a line drawn in the sand. It came after months of public record battles, whistleblower interviews, and escalating series of retaliatory maneuvers that started the moment I began asking questions the city did not want answered. What this case represents is not just my personal defense of civil liberties, but a confrontation on how power operates when cornered. The facts are clear. I filed a federal civil rights lawsuit under 42 U.S.C. 1983 against McCann, against Weitzel, against Bradley, against Carrion, against, the City of Lorain as a whole. And as James McCann, the former police chief. And when I named him and all these people, and Joseph Levesque and McCann and Bradley and Carrion as defendants, each one of them was sued in their personal capacity. The allegations include targeted retaliation and interference with with a protected contract, tort contractual interference, right? And abuse of state power under color of law. These aren't procedural missteps. They're constitutional violations rooted in a culture of bureaucratic intimidation. But the City of Lorain, its response to the lawsuit tells a deeper story. Instead of respecting the independence of the judiciary or ensuring fair and lawful representation in the Board of Control, Bradley and Carrion, quietly or not so quietly, how you want to look, approved taxpayer funding for legal counsel for McCann and Levesque. Not through public bid, not through transparent process, but by awarding $5,000 to each lawyer, so $10,000 total, outside contact for outside counsel for Levesque and McCann. That raises two immediate problems. First, McCann and Levesque are sued as individuals, not as representatives of the city. Again, that'd be like getting a lawyer from the city because you got in trouble for messing with someone's house. It's your problem, not ours. So, not as representative of the city, you can't get city help. Federal law under 1983 is explicitly designed to pierce through that institutional shield and hold those government officials accountable in their own names, not as government officials, not as the public. So when I'm suing, the only person that's getting sued as the public eye is the City of Lorain. And that is why these kind of suits don't automatically entitle these defendants to city-paid representation. Second, the people approving the contracts, Bradley and Carrion, these jackasses are also defendants. They signed off on legal protections, not just for themselves or for their colleague, right? But for people that are their co-defendants. That is literally, absolutely 1,500% textbook conflict of interest. It flies directly in the face of the Ohio Revised Code of 102.03 D&E, which prohibit public officials from participating in decisions where their objectivity is compromised. They didn't recuse themselves, no ethic board review, no nothing, no public hearing, just quiet transfers of public funds into the hands of legal defenders tasked with coordinating and containing the fallout. Even if they didn't approve their own lawyers, they approved someone else's that will help do that. That's not how justice is supposed to work. Well, then there's a broader question like, why Rosenbaum? Why did they pick him of all the people to represent McCann? Why bring back a former prosecutor tied to one of its most discredited cases in county history to handle a civil rights defense in 25? What does that say about how the city views the public's demand for accountability? Well, it kind of says they don't give a shit, right? They don't take it seriously. It says they're more interested in considering defenses than confronting like the misconduct that they did. It says that when power's challenged, it doesn't retreat, it reconfigures and it attacks. It's not theoretical conversation for me. I'm the plaintiff. I'm the one who faced the retaliation, the obstruction, and the coordinated attempts to discredit my work from a lot of people. And now I'm watching in real time as the very fucking people responsible for those actions appoint each other legal shields, while the institutions that should safeguard the public interest look the other way. So that brings us to our next segment. We're going to ask, how does the county this small maintain such a large appetite for secrecy? And what does it mean when those same names, the same roles, the same maneuvers show up case after case after case after year, right? We're going to get into the post-Tomlinson purge and which people survived and who didn't and why. And, you know, what happened when he left office. That's going to bring us to our next break in our long-winded podcast tonight. And we're going to pray that you stick around for a couple of minutes while I play our next sponsor's information for you. Hey there, folks. Here at Unplugged with Aaron Knapp, we like a good beef just as much as the next guy. And all jokes aside, a good beef is a good beef, and I'm not going to have a cow about it. Here at Unplugged, we can actually appreciate the drive behind a good media beef. Debate gets eyeballs, folks. Friction gets engagement. And let's be honest, sometimes a little tension is just good for the ratings. So if you're looking for more coverage of the Nancy Smith case, and if you want to hear commentary supporting Amber Bronish, or if you want to hear clips from my own podcast, rebroadcast and discussed at length, sometimes in episodes that are almost entirely and seemingly about me, then I am going to send you directly over to the Madhouse Podcast, the Madhouse Bar Talk. Yes, seriously, folks, this is a real ad. Unpaid sponsorship. Their mentions have probably driven my views way ahead, and rather than pretend otherwise, I'm going to return the favor by giving them free ad space during tonight's show. No animosity, no drama, just media reality. Now, for clarity's sake, and because I actually care about, the things and doing things the right way, I am not using any of their copyrighted images. I am not playing clips from their podcast. That is intellectual property, and in Ohio, if I did that improperly, they could definitely sue me. I am not interested in that, and if you do not believe me, look it up. So, if you want their content, go directly to the source. Head on over to the Madhouse Bar Talk at YouTube at youtube.com/@Madhouse Bar Talk. That's MAHDHOUSEBARTALK. And that's where you will find more Amber Bronish, more Nancy Smith coverage, and yes, more commentary involving yours truly. Although I would ask moving forward, and I will say this once and only calmly, I do ask that my intellectual property not be reused without permission. That does not stop anyone from criticizing me, discussing me, or disagreeing with me. I fully support that. But I do have a right to tell my story, just as they have clearly told theirs. That's it. That's the statement. No feud, no meltdown. No cows were harmed in the making of this ad. Now back to Unplugged. All right, guys, welcome back. Welcome back. Yeah, I know. Whatever. I like to be a little funny sometimes, And honestly, as I've said 1,000 times every day, I don't dislike anybody. I don't have a beef. I just tell the stories, the news, whatever's factual, not worried about anything else. So go over, check it out. Look at my podcast. Check out all the things they're doing for me. I mean, one of the things they posted about me, according to what they posted, had 21,000 views. Like, that's just good advertisement. So if I am doing what they claim I am, which is looking for likes, which we're all online. I mean, why would you be online if you didn't want likes? Then yeah, that's what we're doing, folks. So we're gonna get to the next part here. J.D. Tomlinson left office in Lorain County in 20, I think it was 24. He didn't just lose an election, right? He became the first prosecutor in decades to publicly admit the office's role in the wrongful conviction, and they actually tried to correct it, right? And for that, he paid the price. But the story of what happened after Tomlinson's exit isn't as important as the firestorm that led to it. Because while he was removed, nearly everyone else stayed. The old networks, everything remained untouched. So let's start with the most telling piece of all this, the continuity, right? Dan Petticord. He was once chief assistant prosecutor on Tomlinson. Now, he holds an administrative post, a Lorain County job, job in family services. He never faced any real consequences for his role in the controversial settlements or his shifting stances on public disclosure. This is the same Petticord who, according to the records, gave private legal advice to Commissioner Jeff Riddell on county matters, on hiding salaries, while simultaneously managing sensitive legal decisions behind the scenes, right? This is the same Petticord who identified as the architect of the Battistelli settlement, basically through his own emails, and the settlement's legal structure, a payout still under public scrutiny. Yet when the dust all settled around that whole situation and the Smith exoneration and the institutional blowback that began, Petticord was like moved laterally. Not out, just no Dan here. Now let's look at the current prosecutor, Tony Sillo, my buddy. Within months of taking office, Sillo filed a stunning motion to vacate the exoneration of Nancy Smith. Exciting. That legal maneuver was not just a matter of law. It was a matter of a message, a shot across the bow. It signaled that correcting institutional error is not politically unpopular, but it's professionally dangerous. Silva didn't just walk back Tomlinson's position. He attempted to erase it entirely, to claw back the exoneration that had been legally granted after years of public and legal reckoning. And that kind of institutional retaliation doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens when the system itself wants to make sure no one else gets that same friggin' idea, right? And I'm going to say this real quick. Like, I get it. Oh, yeah, okay. You guys all remember that little news story about supposedly Silla went after Tomlinson for representing a client he supposedly wants prosecuted. All right. Imagine I believe you cared about that shit. Because that's some Aaron level nitpicky shit, right? You found one client JD represented that under his new law firm he can't represent to make money because he once represented him as a prosecutor or went after him criminally. I would argue that if the client himself has no problem with it, signs a waiver and accepts you as his attorney, there's no ethical violation there because apologies, Mr. Tomlinson. Tomlinson did what he was required by law as prosecutor to do. He prosecuted him. I don't even know if it was him personally. It could have been one of his guys. But under the law, under the code, under the everything, he had to do that. That doesn't mean once he goes back to private practice that it's a conflict of interest. The conflict of interest comes when you're banging somebody or you're doing these other things. Like, those are the problems. So, honestly, from what I know, I could be wrong, but from what I know, JD did not bang that client, both when he was being prosecuted or when he wanted to represent him. But Sillo comes after him, right? That was the first thing he did was, you can't represent that guy. And that kind of felt institutionally the first blow, the shot across the bow. We're coming for you, right? And I went, and I'm the one that got all the documents that showed that's what they were doing. They wanted to hide it. They tried. I didn't let them. But that's where we got to talk about Hall, because Hall and Silla are key players during the entire 2024 election cycle. And I'm part of that, unfortunately. Their campaign wasn't about policy or ideology. It was about singularity focused on removing Tomlinson. I saw it firsthand. I covered it. I questioned it. And I also, in the beginning, promoted it. Yeah, I get it. I can see why someone like JD or his family would think that, well, Aaron hates us. I've told Amber and anyone that will listen, I don't hate any of you. Anyone. I don't even hate Tia Hilton. I recently forgave Aiden Fogel. Nobody really gets it. Y'all think I really do have feelings about all this. I have lines in the sand, I guess, codes of ethics. Like that's what defines me anymore. So if you shake my hand and say, I'm sorry, James, I'll forgive everything. I do. You know how many people got mad at me when I forgave Aiden Fogel? They were like, people who don't like him at all, who are always on my side, even one of my best sources, and I get it. I'm sorry, okay, to my best source, Mr. Cobra. You are my best source, and I've talked to you on the phone. I've listened to all of your messages. I have a whole email file designated Sensei Cobra. You're my bro. You're my buddy. No matter what, I never met you in person. I don't know who you are, but you've checked in on me. You made sure I was okay. You've done battle buddy checks. You've been an integral part of somebody's life that you didn't know, almost like we shared a foxhole together. You have a very broad military bearing about you. And from the very get-go, I could tell that there was something in your emails to all of us journalists and all these people that were reporting this that was beyond, you. It was selfless. Because I want you guys to realize this guy is somebody connected in the county, obviously. He has, or she, or they, or whatever, because they're using a voice changer, but whoever this person is has massive connections within the county, knows everything. The requests are too specific to not know it. They are a whistleblower, just like I was, right? And a campaign is not about policy or ideology. It's about singularity. They wanted Tomlinson gone, right? So this kind of information, like I truly still believe, even though my source does not like Aiden Fogel, does not like these people, does not like Tomlinson or these people, doesn't mean that my source is wrong. I feel like all of these people are players in the same game, right? You're all part of the same chessboard. But what they went after Tomlinson on wasn't about ideology, and I saw it firsthand. I was there, knee deep in it, right? I became part of the narrative that they were trying to control, though, in the end. I became part of the whole obsession with undoing Tomlinson's legacy. It wasn't political, it was personal. It was never personal for me. Never, never, never personal for me. I don't have any feelings about JD Tomlinson, his family, or anyone. It's not personal. It's not even personal with Silla or Hall. Maybe a little with Hall. Okay, look, we'll address that just for a second. Yes, I kind of loved that guy. And yes, I feel highly misled by that guy. I don't know if my spidey sense was off, my emotional awareness, my empath abilities were off, or whether Jack just was that good at fooling me. Or in the grand scheme of things, like in Young Guns, I think it was 2, when Billy turned himself in and the governor's riding off and he goes, he's talking about the governor and him leaving, and he goes like, it wasn't that the governor didn't want to free me. He just didn't have the power against the cattle barons and the sons of bitches that ran the government. I have to say. So I get it. Maybe Jack just doesn't have the power. Maybe Jack just doesn't have the ability to say no to the powers that be. Maybe Jack can't say no to these people. Maybe when he provided his wife's credit card statements to me through Nietzsche at the sheriff's office when I was dropping off evidence, where Nietzsche started out the conversation with, I'll sue anybody that slanders my sheriff. Maybe that's where that came from. Maybe those records were provided for me that I didn't ask for, because I never asked for your wife's credit card records. And what does that prove? It just proves you charged them on your card. It doesn't prove that the commissioners didn't give you the money to pay them off. It does show me that you were there. It does show me that one of my sources was all over that shit, and that source has never been wrong. Right? So Sensei's never been wrong, not once. Yet, Jack, you and I talked so much during the campaign. It pains me at this point. Here's some personal feelings. It pains me to have lost you as a friend. Last time I talked to you as a friend, you recorded me when you were talking about Tia and you were looking to set me up. If you guys really want to look at anybody in this county that's amazingly deceptive, that can truly fuck you, it's your sheriff. It's not your prosecutor. It's not anyone. Look what Jack did. He turned a guy that I'm pretty solid about following the rules, right? That thing I have where the SF 400, where he sent me that statement that had my name signed to it, questioning the SF 400. And he even told me, people came to him afterwards and goes, there's no way Aaron Knapp knew that. And I said, well, I would have figured it out. I do have law enforcement training. I have all the books. I know it. I got it. But they weren't wrong. I didn't figure it out. He did. He wanted to win. I get it, I guess. I naively believed that what he was doing was for the best interest of people, not the best interest of Jack Hall. And even if he was doing what was in the best interest of Jack Hall, I still felt he was the best interest of Lorain County over Rich Resendez. And again, now I look back and I go, neither one of them were worth the fucking, worth the time of voting. We need somebody as sheriff that's going to be above everything. Somebody that's going to be, I don't know. It can't be me because I'm not a cop. But you got to find that perfect cop, right? You got to find that cop that's like me as a social worker that says, look, I swore an oath. I'm going to do this, this, and this, and this. And this is all I'm going to do. And I know there's been some cops like that throughout history. Not all cops are bad. I don't give a fuck. You guys, I know you think I think that. I don't hate cops. I hate dishonest people. Cops, military, government, humans, anybody next to me. But if you could find me the perfect cop to be the perfect sheriff, that's what I want. When I voted for Jack and when I talked to Jack that whole election, all we ever talked about was with McCann and all that was, I don't want you to punish McCann. I want you to investigate him. I want you to give me a solid, reasonable investigation. When I went into the madhouse thing, I told the detective, I don't want blame to be placed on anyone per se. I just want a solid investigation. I want to know who assaulted me. I want to know what everything that happened. Well, they video put it out later, and I still can't watch it because it's traumatizing. I don't care what Tucker and them say. They think it's funny to make fun of me, and I brought it on myself and all this stuff. Dude, you posted a video of me getting a living shit beat out of me. If you can explain why that was okay, cool. That's it, bro. I don't have anything else to add. They're like, but Tomlinson, his shit wasn't just political, it was personal. They went after him because it was as if acknowledging that wrongful conviction with Nancy Smith, that case just posed an existential threat to the entire machinery of this local system. And you guys are sold on this system, right? You truly, a lot of you believe in like this whole idea that the mafia and all these people control all this shit here. And I don't know, maybe they do, but I wasn't around to know that. But here's what I don't understand until it was said much later is like the campaign wasn't about Tomlinson or just about Tomlinson. It was about preserving the web of the official network of officials, advisors, and legal actors who had built their careers on this old model. Quiet decisions, low transparency, selective accountability. I began to understand that through my own work, right? That it wasn't until, in the end, though, that I met Amber, that my continued expanding of my records and my research, that the full scope of the pattern became clear, right? not about one case, not about one prosecutor. It's about this county's institutions and the way they protect themselves from reform, right? So think about this. I get it. Tomlinson, no matter how you think about it, probably shouldn't have been involved in the Jennifer Battistelli stuff. I get it. But imagine if Jennifer was sent. And look, all the women, do me a favor and like step out of the room for a minute or plug your ears and go la 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 la. But for all you guys out there, you're gonna tell me you couldn't have been seduced by her? Maybe not Garen, because he's in love with his wife, and maybe those of you that are with your wives, I get that. But given the situation, you're JD, you're a young prosecutor with power, education, arguably looks. I'm not saying, like, I'm not trying to be gay, but he's not a bad looking guy. And you got this lady, arguably with a background, but not everybody knows it. And arguably, as men, we will make a lot of bad decisions when it comes to women. How many times have you guys seen a girl pop up in the Lorain County, like, busted or whatever, been like, what's your charge? Oh, disorderly conduct? I could change her. Oh, domestic violence? Oh, he must have done something wrong. As men, we're visual creatures, so I get it. You're going to tell me that you guys couldn't have been misled by a Battistelli? I've said it before. Either JD was willfully ignorant and ignored it, willfully stupid, which, look, I know I don't give the highest cast of intelligence to lawyers, but unlike cops, they go to school. Tomlinson has a doctorate, just like fucking Silo, just like all of the Lorain Law Department. I know I may belittle that, but there's something to be said about that. That these men are intelligent. These are intelligent, educated men. Some of them, though, were educated a long time ago. Some of them recently. JD a little more recently. I was educated in 22. That's why my thoughts and my processes are a bit further beyond that of my predecessors. Part of education isn't just going to school, it's continuing education and understanding what's going on. A lot of these people forgot current case law. What they used to know is not what they do know. And what they have used to know is now current case law. That's why I win every time. And that's why what happened to Tomlinson was actually a purge, right? It wasn't a transition from Silo to Tomlinson to Silo, sorry. It was a purge. And the people who orchestrated it made sure that none of the systems surrounding him and Tomlinson were meaningfully disrupted, right? All the payouts kept coming. The contractors, they all stayed. The legal advisors switched roles like Dan Petticord, but they remained in power. Rosenbaum's back, advising people. Petticord reassigned, but still within the county, still under that whole net, the Gambora net. The cast rotated, but the play still stayed the same. It's still the same players, the same actors, the same bad actors. So where does that leave us, right? With a warning. The reformers in Lorain City, Lorain County, you don't face just electoral challenges like me. You're going to face a system that retaliates through silence, omission, and the careful placement of loyalists in its key positions. Tomlinson's removal and Silo's retaliatory motion and my own involvement in that are proof that transparency still costs here. And that the system, when challenged, will always protect itself before it corrects itself. Protect yourself before you correct yourself. God damn it. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. 1,000%. In our next segment, we're going to talk about the long tail of the Smith case, right? I know. Long time ago, but what else you got to? It's Saturday. We're going to talk about how the prosecutorial DNA continues to mutate across all these departments, all these contracts, and all these courtrooms. We're going to trace the legacy of the conviction that kind of refuses to die, right? And how Rosenbaum's return signals more than just legal representation. It signals the refusal of power to ever truly relinquish control. We're going to get into the SF 400 that I wrote, or Jack's lawyer wrote, i.e. Nietzsche, and that gambit, and when political ambition became part of this whole state of action. So stay tuned, folks, as we bring our next episode up. If you own a business and you want to reach customers right here in Lorain County and Vermilion, this is your opportunity, folks. Advertising space is now available in Lorain Daily, Vermilion Daily, and DAC Radius. That means your business can reach local readers, local listeners, and a highly engaged community audience. And here's a bonus. For a small add-on fee, your business will also be advertised once per episode on my podcast, Unplugged with Aaron Knapp, as long as your ad remains active on one of those two platforms. This is web exposure plus podcast exposure in one package. If you're interested in advertising, contact me now to reserve your spot through Facebook, email, or reach out directly. Ad space is limited and local visibility matters, folks. This was an unpaid for ad by both these individuals, paid for by Aaron Knapp. Unrequested, unsponsored, but well deserving.
Unplug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop.
So we're back here with political ambition before it becomes actual state action. That's right, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the one person apparently that's still watching. I can see up there in the corner. Eventually, I'm going to remember how to put the all the comments up there so I can see them, but I forget. Anyway, we're rolling into the atmosphere that was rolling to that election. It was already a volatile political atmosphere surrounding the Lorain County Sheriff's race when I got involved. It took a sharp and personal turn. Jack Hall, he was a declared candidate for sheriff. He and I were working together. I mean, Resendez called it out a bunch of times. Obviously, I was working with his campaign, but I made sure to keep it distant. But at one point, an email, a very critical email, made it personal. He asked me to do something for him, and he was losing, I guess, in his mind at the time. I thought he was winning, but I always thought he was winning because I supported him. His attorney, I guess it was Nietzsche. I mean, I'm assuming because that's the guy that's still his attorney, but sent me this letter requesting an SF-400 for Ohio Peace Officer Training Commission of Rich Resendez. Now, I didn't know what that was, but I was supposed to ask it of the Lorain city. So I did. And then I asked wrong or did something wrong, so I'm not even going to bring that up. And McCann, oh, fuck, man. McCann made such fun of me, and rightfully so. For the record, if you're watching or you ever watch James, out of all of the times that you had an opportunity to really me, right? That was the one time, and you did a fucking amazing knockoff job of that shit. I'll have to admit, I read that, and I was like, damn, he got me good. I messed up. I wrote a bunch of stuff. Well, I took a bunch of stuff from what was written for me, and then I kind of mixed it together with what I wrote, and it didn't come out quite right. And James fucked me up. He was like, first off, blah, 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 and second off, blah, 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 and third off, blah, blah, blah. But if you want blah, 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 then blah, 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 and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. I was like, I tried to recover, but it was some pretty fucking hard blows. Like, good job, James. Like, as my daughter would say to me, or I would say to her when she's hammering me, touche. Touche, James. James hit me back, but in the end, I still got the answers I wanted, even though I felt like an embarrassing fool. But it wasn't my request. That's why I felt stupid. I didn't know the answers. That's why I looked stupid when I asked all these questions of the police and of all these people. I didn't know what the fucking SF-400 was. I still really don't. But it has something to do with where did you work and how long you stay a police officer. Everyone argued with me that Jack wasn't one because he wasn't, but he was under that SF-400. He was a reserve officer. So all these things that were sent to me and I sent in, they were a form as a vehicle used to initiate review or decertification proceedings against peace officers, right? Carried with an explosive set of attachments. Among them, Hall sent me a statement that was challenging the fitness of Rich Resendez, the only other figure central to the sheriff's officer's race. And he sent me a letter, which I posted, citing evaluations provided by me, Aaron Knapp. Right? Okay. I didn't know shit about an SF-400. Would I have? Yes. Could I have? Yes. If you'd asked me to, yes. Would I have researched this, done this, nailed this, been the guy for it, and you'd have had no problems whatsoever? All you had to do is not rush. Just say, hey, Aaron, do us a favor. Here's a thought. You give me a thought, I'll find the legal aspect for it, right? But they didn't do that. They wanted to win. They didn't want me to find it, which was the better way. Up till now, that's all they'd done. All they'd done was say, hey, Aaron, look at this. Hey, Aaron, for your reading pleasure, your reading edification, as Jack would say. They would send me things. I'd read it. I'm smart. I'm not stupid. I'm going to fucking read that and go, ew. And then I'm going to write on it. But in this case, to date, I still know nothing about what an SF-400 is, nothing about what I did, and nothing about what it means in this scenario. This was all done within law enforcement terms. I'm not a cop. I've never been one. I did study to be a cop, but I was never within their system to know what an SF-400 is, or even in Ohio to know what that is. It was in California. So let's be clear about that. What it means. That means, right? As a political candidate seeking law enforcement power, leveraged by my previous reporting and assessments, without my direct initiation of the request, and as a basis for urging a state agency to intervene in his rival's career, Rich Resendez. Hall's filing to me that I was supposed to send cited my name specifically, characterized by my evaluation as Resendez, or as evidence of substantial concerns about Mr. Resendez's temperament, supervisory judgment, and capacity to serve as Lorain County Sheriff. And in doing so, Hall or his lawyer or whoever sent it to me through Hall's Hall for Sheriff email address embedded a journalistic and civic critique, so to speak, into formal attempts to disqualify an opponent from public office. Now, I wasn't news at that time. At that time, I was just Aaron Knapp, the asshole. Now I'm Aaron Knapp, the asshole reporter. But that alone should alarm anyone that's concerned about the line between what a watchdog is and accountability and weaponized retaliation looks like. But it doesn't end there. And at the time of the request, tensions between those two factions, myself included, within the sheriff's office, the prosecutor's office, the county political leadership, were already at a boiling point. Resendez, whose own conduct had drawn his own sharp criticism, right, including mine, appeared to be the target of a coordinated campaign. And not long after Hall's filings, documents began to emerge that pointed to another internal nature, right, rupture. The leaking of sensitive recordings involving, like, everybody started talking about what happened with Jennifer Battistelli's leaks. And the problem with all of that is that then, you know, all of the JD stuff that he undid with Amber also led to Montalon releasing a bunch of videos and audios that weren't supposed to be released. And that stuff started kicking back up into the whole hemisphere when JD released or exonerated Amber's mom. Taken together, these events sketch a vivid picture of Lorain County's internal politics, right? Hall, who at the time I didn't realize was attempting to ascend to the top of a law enforcement post. I did know that. He didn't simply challenge Resendez at the ballot box. He petitioned a state oversight body to remove him from the field entirely, using my own reporting as part of that weaponization. Now, well, I say reporting because I'm so used to saying that. At the time, it wasn't reporting. I had no website. I don't even think I had a anything site. All I had was being annoying online. It was just Aaron Knapp's page, right? Oh, and then I had to dump my page because my work got on me about McCann, and then I opened up George Patton. That's what it was. It was George Patton initially, my fake page. Eventually became I eventually opened up a new Aaron Knapp page after I got fired. So Hall's using me completely, right? I get it. Even Aiden Fogel said it once. Hall's just using you, and eventually you're going to get discarded. And I said, if that's the case, that's fine. Because I'm kind of using him too, because I'm mad at Resendez. And I was. Still say that 1,000%. I don't think Resendez should have been sheriff. He's just like lazy-minded. He's not sharp. I still think if Jack hadn't given all his friends big-ass bonus positions as majors who never worked their way up the rank, he would have had better money and wouldn't be in this position. But he rewarded his people, every one of his people except for the one that got him actually elected. The one that got him elected, more or less, overall, this guy, by trashing his opponent through means that he gave me the methodology to do. That guy, right, he didn't, and I didn't want nothing. I didn't want Mary or anyone to be able to say, because Mary was like, who got jobs? Well, is Mary really wrong? Is Mary Springalski wrong about Hall when she says who got jobs? No, she's not. Because a lot of his people got jobs, including Anthony Nietzsche, who got a job he doesn't even need. Or even, do we need as a public? Why are we paying Anthony Nietzsche a salary for the sheriff's department to monitor the records department, the AG, whatever site, and be legal for sheriff's department? When you have a legal advisor and lead by law, by ballot, by everything, by RC. So we're going to pay whatever you're paying, and you can go look it up. Whatever they're paying Nietzsche is bullshit. Just straight up. That's all it is. It's just bullshit. And I can say whatever I want about that. Like, nobody's going to get it. But in the grand scheme of things, just
a bullshit, a bullshit, a bullshit, a bullshit, a bullshit, a bullshit, a bullshit.
So, you do what you want. But meanwhile, in the midst of all this, Jack sent me something I didn't find until recently, right? I never really realized it because we were really going hard on Resendez. He was sending me shit, items after items after items, and I'm trying to process them. And I'm smart, but fuck, there's a lot of information. So I get this Montalon report, right? And I never understood this name, nothing, until Amber comes along. She kept saying the word Montalon. I didn't know what it was, like Detective Montalon. Then I remember Jack said something about Montalon. But what Jack was saying about Montalon, and I would have used the shit out of this if I'd have realized at the time he had sent it to me, but I didn't. I found it in my inbox unlooked at. Montalon having once been the target of Resendez's internal maneuvering. Jack, you really wanted to win. You should have told me about this sooner. I would have hammered him on this. But it appears that Resendez, regardless of anybody else, retaliated in kind by facilitating disclosures that cast further doubt into the department's integrity, right? I'm sorry, like going after Montalon because Montalon was actually saying these things. Here's the irony. Even if every concern I raised about Resendez was valid, and I believe they were, because there were a lot of things Jack shared with me that were deeply bothersome, right? I think Rich should have been a bad sheriff. I don't think Jack's lying helps him any, or the way he manipulated me or others, but Rich wouldn't have worked. And there remains something deeply uncomfortable about how that criticism was repurposed, right? When it comes to Resendez, that I said that was valid, and it's just uncomfortable how the criticism was repurposed without my consent into a political cudgel by a man vying for a very political position that Resendez was trying to occupy as well. Samedi held it, but Resendez wanted it. Jack wanted it. And that's why the context matters. That's why transparency matters. That's why those of us engaged in uncovering misconduct must also vigilantly track how that work is repackaged, distorted, or turned into ammunition in battles we never agreed to join. I slid into this on accident, but I became a full-on weapon in it. Lorain County doesn't suffer from a shortage of law enforcement experience or a public record. It suffers from a shortage of accountability. And that cuts across all political lines. The SF-400 letter was not just a filing. It was a flare shot into an already crowded sky. A reminder that in this county, the personal is always political, right? Personal is always political. The political is always personal. Let that sink in. The personal is always political, and the political is always personal. You can't separate them. The institutional whiplash that comes from that, though, is who gets protected and who gets purged, right? What makes that SF-400 filing against Resendez even more deadly and consequential is that it wasn't just simply what was said in it, but what and who leveraged it and who didn't. It was Jack Hall, not a sitting sheriff or an administrator, who used the Ohio Peace Officer Training Commission as a battleground. I think even Rich Resendez said it at the time. He even called me out for it. I got kind of mad. My bad. I was wrong. All right, look, God damn it. Fuck, I got to stop this real quick. So I was wrong. I got all mad at Resendez. So you can, I was Hall's weapon. So I know at some point you said that, and I bitched and moaned about it. And the only reason I wasn't Hall's weapon is because he never, honestly, I still say that because I never gained any benefit from it. He never gave me anything. No job, no nothing. In fact, right after the election, he put his dick so far up my ass that I thought he was a pretty gay guy. Now I just know he's pretty, but I mean, like, the whole Tia Hilton thing was crazy. But yes, Hall used me to fuck Rich. And Hall may have been seeking legitimacy, or he may have been extracting revenge. I don't know. But whatever he was doing was not acting in a vacuum, right? His petition came in the middle of what was fast becoming a war of attrition inside the county's legal apparatus. And the deeper you dig, the more you see these patterns emerge, right? Let's take a moment to step back. Observe the broader ecosystem. Prosecutor J.D. Tomlinson was ousted under intense public scrutiny after moving to overturn one of the county's most infamous wrongful convictions. And now he's gone. Yet Dan Petticord, he remains. Petticord, the same man that advised commissioners during the Bastille Payoff to do it. He resisted transparency, and now he holds a high-level role at the Lorain County Job and Family Services that he's retained institutional legitimacy. Not only did he survive the reshuffling, he appears to have landed safely in an administrative post without any sort of public oversight, or at least less. And the pattern repeats itself, right? Those who challenge the structure tend to exit under suspicious circumstances, right? Or pressure, like me. Those who help preserve it simply shift jobs, change titles, or become less visible and less influential. That's payment. That's your reward, right? You got to be on the front lines. You got to take some hits, but we're going to let you, in the end, settle back here. That's not coincidence. It's survival. It's a survival mechanism that entrenches itself in all of these entrenched systems. It entrenches itself in all. Embeds itself. I like that word, but it embeds itself as a survival mechanism in all of these entrenched systems. And what are those systems, right? Petticord's simultaneous involvement in advising county officials like Jeff Riddell, Dave Moore, and all these people during the suppression of the county records and the settlement records, while previously advising J.D. Tomlinson in the matter on the other side on how to do it. And it feels a little simultaneously directional and duplicative, right? 1 minute he's an advisor to the county commissioners, right? Dan Petticord is. He's telling them, do it. The next, he occupies another layer of institutional role playing. He's advising JD, this is the way we can do it legally. And JD's not allowed to be his own lawyer, right? I never really contemplated this, and I haven't until I started looking at these positions and the way each one applies. Jack Bradley may be a lawyer, but he can't be his own lawyer as a mayor. There's ethics, there's government, there's things at play. You cannot represent yourself. It's not like you're representing you're representing the government, and the government is who you're dealing with, not the individual. Unless, of course, you sue him under a 1983 like me, and then I'm suing the individual, and then the government doesn't give a fuck or matter. That's why all that shit matters. But anyway, 1 minute you got an advisor, the next minute you got a litigant, the next minute you got this, you got that. That's all Petticord. He occupies multiple layers of this institutional role playing. I see him more as he's like the Kaiser Soze or whatever that guy was in The Usual Suspects. That's about how the game is played, right? It's not about one man. That's how you play the game. So we go back to Hall and Resendez, the political environment that allowed Hall to use my reporting, my name, my advice, my education against Resendez is the same environment that allowed former city employees like James McCann, police chief, to receive taxpayer-funded legal defense without any justification from the public. It's the same environment that allowed Rosenbaum to return despite his past. Not in despite of his past, but because of it, because he's attached to all this shit. Montalon's role, too, cannot be understood in isolation. And the only reason I got it was because Jack Hall gave it to me to discredit Resendez, because Montalon was harassing Resendez, and Resendez's mind, and Resendez used the color of law to go after Montalon. That's a 1983 violation in itself. Resendez caused a protection order a search warrant to be issued on Montalon's home to get First Amendment protected documentation from Montalon that he thought offended Rich, right? Rich thought it offended him. That makes it personal that he can't do that. So From the start, what they did to Montalon, not only did Montalon have to dismiss, but it was illegal. Under color of law, Rich should have been a 1983 candidate right there. That's why he shouldn't have been sheriff. I don't give a fuck. Jack may be a dick now, but he wasn't a dick then. That qualifies Jack then and Rich not. His deposition, though, Montalon's deposition was how Resendez revealed himself and viewed Montalon as a threat and a liability. Montalon became a source for leaked internal recordings that destabilized narratives around key players like Amber Bronish and Sel Rivera. Now, whether this was retribution or conscience, it had the effect of cracking the county's preferred version of this events wide open. He also, back in those days, they raided his home because he was thought to be the whistleblower, the letter writer that was exposing a lot of issues within Lorain PD. Sel Rivera didn't like it. Rich Resendez didn't like it. Rich Resendez was the victim of it. They thought it was Montalon, so they went after him. But at one point, they thought it was actually Dennis Flores that went after him. They couldn't figure out who it was, but they went after Montalon. So I got this Montalon thing not because of Montalon, not because of Amber, not because of Nancy, but because of Rich. And I read it, and I came back to it later and was like, oh, shit, he missed this. So, folks, look, all of this, you have to decide if it's retribution or conscience. But when that's all of this is a fundamental question. Who decides who and what is remembered and what is punished and what is ignored? The filing of a form, the quiet retention of a familiar lawyer like Rosenbaum, the disappearance of one public figure while another one resurfaces under a new title. Sound familiar? All of these are decisions. And in Lorain County, those decisions are too often made behind closed doors, informed by more political loyalty than public interest. And on our next segment, we're going to turn that focus inward. We're going to dissect the case that ties all of these threads together. In my case, Knapp versus City of Lorain et al., and how the city's legal response to my own civil rights suit further illustrates a structure not built for transparency, but for containment. We're going to go into the segment title of, and my next segment title, which is The Walls That Close In, inside Knapp v. City of Lorain et al., and how civil rights lawsuits become a mirror of institutional rot. And before we do that, we're going to take a quick break and move on to our little ad, and then I'll be right back. Hey there, folks. DNC Radio is your home for real conversations, real community voices, and independent radio that doesn't answer to the corporate filters or political scripts. From music to live talk, community issues to uncensored discussion, DNC Radio is powered by the people, not the algorithms. If you're tired of sanitized media and ready for something real, tune into DNC Radio. You can follow and listen right now at facebook.com/DNC Radio OH. That's facebook.com/DNC Radio OH. DNC Radio, independent voices, local community, no filter. Follow now at facebook.com/DNC Radio OH. DNC Radio. Hey there, folks. Aaron here at Unplugged with Aaron Knapp. I want to give you a quick reminder for everyone watching that the City of Lorain holds its regular city council meetings on the first and third Monday of every month. And those meetings are not just for council members. They are for residents. If you care about what happens in your city, and if you speak or want to speak on an issue, ask a question, or simply be present and informed, showing up matters. Participation matters. Even sitting in the room and listening matters. You do not need to be an expert on any of this. You do not need permission to care. You do not need to do anything other than just show up. So check the agenda, folks. Mark your calendar. And if something affects your neighborhood, your family, or your future, take a seat, raise your hand, and make your voice part of the record. Lorain City Council, first and third Monday. Your city, your meetings. Those council meetings start at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and they're held inside of City Hall. Make sure you attend this Monday's meeting.
Unplug with Knapp. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcast.
All right, folks, we're back. By the time I filed Knapp v. City of Lorain et al., I already knew what I was walking into, right? But what I didn't expect, at least not fully, was how nakedly defensive the city's power structure would become, right? There was not just legal response, it's a fortress of self-preservation. The lawsuit has always been about more than just James McCann or Joseph Levesque. It's always been about the system that believed it could retaliate against a social worker and then close ranks when the light got too bright. Let's begin with what should have been uncontroversial. A social worker documenting police conduct, seeking records, asking uncomfortable questions. Instead of transparency, I was met with, obfuscation. Instead of lawful responses, I got surveillance, stonewalling, and direct retaliation. My lawsuit alleges what any fair observer would recognize as a pattern of First Amendment violations and an abusive process directed by the individuals at Maine. And they were not acting as neutral public servants as they should have been, but as threatened political actors. The suit lays out how the retaliation was not hypothetical, it was not material, it was not coordinated. It was coordinated and it was personal. And yet, when the time came for the City of Lorain to respond, they didn't send their law department into court. They went elsewhere. They hired private legal counsel. I get why. For their former police chief, McCann, who is no longer a police chief and is a citizen using taxpayer funds. Who did they choose? Jonathan Rosenbaum. The same Rosenbaum whose career has long been tied to protecting institutions from transparency. The same Rosenbaum whose prosecutorial decisions decades earlier still haunt the lives of Nancy Smith and Joseph Allen and their families. The message was clear. The defense of power will be handled by someone trusted to protect it, no matter the optics or the conflicts. Rosenbaum's contract wasn't approved not by a neutral administrator or by city council, but by co-defendants. Mayor Jack Briley, Safety Service Director Ray Carrion. Both of these men voted to fund their fellow defendants' defense fund without even a public explanation or proper procedural safeguards. They made no attempt to explain why McCann needed a private attorney paid for by the city. They offered no legal memo justifying it, and I've asked. And they certainly did not offer the public a chance to understand how and why Rosenbaum was selected. Even more telling is why they didn't receive the same, who didn't receive that same scrutiny. Levesque, the assistant law director, is also named in the suit. He quietly secured separate private counsel, no competitive sourcing, no public hearing, no ethical guardrails. These aren't anomalies, folks. This is evidence of a system that views legal retaliation really kind of against critics, not as a breach really, but as a standard of operating procedure. This story is not just about Lorain. It's about every public body that believes it can actually act with impunity as long as its inner circle remains intact. As long as it is about the lawyers who rotate between prosecutor, defender, and advisor and judge without ever truly stepping outside the circle of influence. It's about the contracts awarded in silence, the votes that are made without debate, and the settlements paid without acknowledgement or any sort of public acknowledgement, at least in that case. And Knapp versus City of Lorain exposes the muscle memory of that local government that no longer recognizes its own ethical decay. And yeah, I'm a plaintiff in that case. I do not pretend to be neutral. I get it. But what I have is something the system fears. You know, that little thing called documentation, receipts, as James calls them. Public records, audio, depositions, emails, contracts, and a relentless refusal to stop asking questions that makes people in power squirm a little bit. So in the next section, we're going to talk about how these same players and others like them have maintained their grip on Lorain County institutions for decades. From courthouse powers and politics to campaign finance ties, we expose the informal networks that keep the gears turning, even when the public believes that the machine has stopped. And that's where we get to segment 7, A Daughter's Vigil and the Unofficial Archivist. So to understand the weight of the history, you have to really kind of talk to the people who have carried it. Amber Brunish is one of them. She is not a public official. She's not part of the legal or political class, right? She is the daughter of Nancy Smith, the woman at the center of Lorain County's most infamous wrongful conviction, along with Joseph Allen. And yet, through relentless research, document collection, and public engagement, Amber's become something far more potent than an office holder. She's become a steward of memory, an unofficial archivist to her mother's truth, and a force that the institutions cannot easily silence. And the people love. I've seen it firsthand. They come up to her. Amber's role has never been about politics, right? It's always been about survival, dignity, and correction. She didn't inherit her voice from a campaign. She earned it through years of witnessing a justice system that criminalized her mother without proof and exonerated her only after it stripped away decades of her life, liberty, and her pursuit of happiness. Constitutional guarantees. Her work has helped resurface key documents, uncover critical discrepancies, and build bridges between the past and the present. She's done this not for credit, but for clarity, and because the official record is so often failed to tell the full story. In a county where power tends to circulate among the same families, the same factions, and the same law firms, Amber represents a different kind of continuity. She represents the families impacted by institutional failure and all of the children who came of age while their parents were processed through a system that was more interested in conviction than truth. She stands for those that lived perspective that's proven vital, not just in shaping public memory, but in challenging the sanitized narratives that powerful actors in our county continue to promote. Her collaboration with others, advocates and journalists, including myself, who have engaged in parallel investigations, have helped illuminate how certain names and interests have become reappearing, and how those records are buried or manipulated, and how justice is often reserved for only those who have the right allies. She's challenged those dynamics, not through press conferences or public titles, but through emails, file folders, timelines, and footnotes, and podcasts, and everything. So those that, through all that quiet, essential labor of someone who actually refuses to forget her mom's sacrifice and struggle. In any honest accounting of Lorain County's legal reckoning, Amber's contribution cannot be regulated to the margins, right, guys? Her presence has to be focused on uncomfortable conversations. It's forced them. Her documentation has complicated neat conclusions. Her determination has helped ensure that the wrongful convictions of Nancy Smith is both remembered and closed as a chapter, but as a warning that architecture of error remains very much intact, right? When people say justice takes time, what they really mean is it takes people like Amber, people who never stop asking, never stop reading, never stop pressing for what the system would rather bury. Her story reminds us that Lorain County, the resistance to forgetting, must come from those who were never supposed to speak in the first place, right? I'm going to just say she inspires me. As much as she may not realize it, even in different scenarios, how is what she's doing any different than what I'm doing? Everyone told Amber that her mom was guilty. Everyone told Amber that her mom was wrong. Everyone told Amber that her mom was guilty. That's what they've all done to me. But okay. I'm just fighting for me. But we're going to get into that next segment here, the segment of the network that never sleeps. It's entrenchment, it's realignment, and it's strange survival of power in Lorain County, right? Because if you've been watching Lorain County politics long enough here, you know that people change seats. The table stays the same, though. That's the whole story underneath the headlines. The story behind why J.D. Tomlinson's gone, why nearly everyone else connected with the fallout of Smith case and its political aftershocks still remain. Let's be clear about the timeline. Tomlinson, who served as Lorain County prosecutor, took a stand that few others dared to. I can respect that more than anyone. JD admitted that the system got it wrong. He initiated the process that finally dropped the charges against Nancy Smith. You saw it just happen in Columbus, or not Columbus, I think it was Cleveland recently. Like, people see this, they start to do the right thing. You become a catalyst. But he initiated that process to finally drop the charges against Smith and Allen. He backed their full exoneration. He ended decades of official denial. And for that, he was met with not institutional applause, but with the slow and grinding pushback that ultimately accumulated in his political isolation. My bad. But by contrast, look at who survived. Again, like I said, Dan Petticord, Tomlinson's former chief of assistant. He didn't vanish. He just reappears in Lorain County Job and Family Services, not as a background player, but as a central figure in structuring the controversial Batterstelli statement. He is all about Jeff Riddell, official channels, raising questions about conflicts of interest and procedural ethics, yet no consequences, no hearings, just reassignment. We look at Silo and we ask questions like, why did he, after he took over for Tomlinson, immediately move to vacate and the exoneration, ruling in Smith's case, a move that stunned legal observers and signaled a chilling return to form, right? His actions that he said he wasn't going to do, because I believe he said he wasn't going to do that during the election cycle. And I believed him, apparently lied. They were deliberate. They were cheered in silence by the same institutional voices that had grumbled through the years of innocence claims and public scrutiny. Why reverse the exoneration? Why now? And why reanimate the case that had long been buried under the weight of its own discredited foundations? That say what you want, the whole thing was a falsehood, and it's been proven that way. That's the concept of whole structural loyalty that comes into focus. You don't need a conspiracy when everybody involved already understands what's at stake. If Tomlinson's reformist streak was exposed, what it really did was expose the soft underbelly of the entrenched power, like the dragon in fucking The Hobbit, right? The little chink in the armor. Silo's count, Silo. Like in the grand scheme, I guess Tomlinson began a chink in the armor. Silo's countermeasures were a reassertion of equilibrium. The message that he sent to other officials is unmistakable. You step too far out of line and the machinery will edge you out. Play your role and the machine will protect you. That's it. Amber Bronish, she's just a public figure documenting her mom's issues and patterns of internal dysfunction, once told me something I can't forget. Shit, in Lorain County, you don't lose influence. You just get reassigned. Like, you just get moved somewhere else. That's what's happened. Figures connected to the settlements, the secrecy, the shadow, the legal work, that it hasn't disappeared. It's adapted. It's reshuffled. Titles, they're still there. They're embedded. They're making decisions that shape public access to justice and accountability, just like Dan Petticord with Jeff Riddell. Which brings us to the judges. Thomas Tesalito's role in all of this and ruling in politically sensitive cases like Barilla v. Tomlinson. That's where Rosenbaum once again shows his face. He served as counsel. Only further underlines how tightly wound the system is. Public campaign finances show that Tesalito and Rosenbaum appear in the same cycles, connected through donations and shared networks. Is this illegal? No. They're allowed to support who they want. But it's revealing, because in accounting where legal outcomes are often reflect the institutional alignments, the appearance of impropriety isn't just formality, it's essential. And it's where we're sorely lacking in Lorain County. That's why the institutions survive even when cases implode. The personnel shifts, the titles change, but the relationships remain intact. This isn't a story of rogue officials, it's a story of loyal ones. It's a story of ones that are about the culture inertia that protects those who protect the system, regardless of public trust or democratic integrity, right? Regardless of lies or truth. The post-Tomlinson era has not brought reform, as they promised. It's brought restoration. The old order is back in place, more careful now, right? More tactical, but no less committed to preserving itself. And unless that structure is not just exposed but dismantled, it will outlast every reformer who ever tries to stand against it. So coming up next, we're going to get into our most recent deposition of, Richard Montalon, whatever his first name was, and the bitter, feud on how Resendez turned a sprawling saga of leaks, smears, and political gamemanship with me right in the middle, right? So Resendez, Montalon, the battle for control of the narrative. By the time that political tides had started to shift in the aftermath of the Smith exoneration and Tomlinson ouster, like a new proxy war had begun inside Lorain County law enforcement circles. The one that was far more covert and complicated. It played out not in courtrooms, but through back channel depositions, whisper campaigns, and internal memos. A power struggle that was like echoes of old loyalties and new fears going all the way back to Sheriff Greg White. I heard names like White, Stamidi. At the center of this was former Lorain County Sheriff's Office investigator, Rich Resendez. He's running for sheriff, and his deeply contentious relationship with this guy, John Montalon, Sergeant Montalon, Detective Montalon. The animosity between the two men was not just personal, it's reflected in the institutional fractures, generational divides over policing philosophy, rivalries over information access, and different alignments with county leadership, dispositions that show that Resendez had a documented fixation on discrediting Montalon repeatedly, raising concerns about his conduct and attempting to marginalize him within the agency, whether driven by personal dislike or political marching orders. The target and the targeting was persistent. So, Montalon, for all his polarizing qualities, didn't go quietly, right? After years of what appeared to be professional isolation, Montalon leaked a series of controversial recordings, kind of known as the Bronish Rivera tapes. And these recordings were implicated by law enforcement. It was actually just a couple. He got a hold of like one tape. But law enforcement officers and political actors in the conversations about retaliation, civil liability, and internal affairs and discipline, the tapes caused quite a stir, right? Not just because of who revealed them, but because of who was releasing them. Montalon's actions effectively turned the tables, shining light on the side of the county operations that many had sought to keep hidden. The very investigator who had been sidelined and attacked became the whistleblower, right? So when you think about that, like Montalon at that time had been criticizing Rich Resendez, and that's why Rich had such a hard-on for Montalon. Like nowhere in this tug of war is it more evident in that SF 400 lever than an internal evaluation requested and authored by Jack Hall during his campaign for sheriff. Hall, who once positioned himself as as a reform candidate, submitted the letter requesting an internal investigation into Resendez's qualifications and behavior. What made that document explosive was not just its content, but its endorsements. My name was included on the letter without prior consent. I mean, it was. I sent it alongside a reference to my evaluation that they wrote as well of Resendez's credibility. I was pulled into this factional battle I hadn't initiated but by then it was too late. It was already public record. The moment that made something clear to me. It wasn't no longer about Resendez or Montalon. It was about who would be allowed to define the official record in Lorain County. And it was about whether these institutions could actually use internal documentation, selective enforcement, and strategic silence to erase dissenters or shield the status quo. When evidence becomes a political weapon and evaluations are weaponized in proxy wars, the truths become harder to locate and much easier to control. In this way, the Resendez Montalon episode reveals just another layer of how Lorain's legal and enforcement system and infrastructure has just operated in recent years. It's not just power that protects itself. It reshuffles alliances, it reframes dissent, and it keeps rotating a cast of insiders on the script, right? Now we get into segment 9, the influence and the informant pipeline, right? The politics of secrecy. And if there's one single thread that's running through this whole thing, the stories of Rosenbaum, McCann, Barilla, Montalon, the Smith-Allen saga, it's this. Lorain County, the people with access to information often become the most dangerous. Not because of what they know, right? It's because of who, I should say, decides what they're allowed to reveal. The Bronish Rivera recordings and that Montalon linked interview were a little bit more than just the Bronish Rivera recordings that Montalon leaked, the one that he got from her apparently, was more than just embarrassment. It revealed the extent to which the information was being managed, not for justice, but for control. How'd they get the tape? How'd they get in Amber's house? How'd they get all this stuff? But that's a different story for a different day. I don't have all the answers to that. But I do know conversations about how to handle the complaints, how to dodge exposure, and how to retaliate quietly, all of which were captured on tape. And once those tapes surfaced, there was no putting the genie back in the bottle. Once we discussed that Sel Rivera had doubts about the whole case, the power structure was exposed, not just politically, defensively, as it was done in a way that was not just politically defensive, but it was operationally strategic. The goal wasn't to prevent wrongdoing. The goal was to contain the damage within or when the wrongdoing occurred, right? That brings us to the question of informants, internal memos, confidential briefings. Across the entire timeline from Smith's prosecution to the Barilla lawsuit, we see a consistent reliance on informal channels to manage institutional crisis. Whether it's Rosenbaum advising on a legal strategy without formal appropriate appointment, or whether it's, whether it's Petticord doing the same, whether it's Riddell behind closed doors, despite statutory constraints, meeting with Petticord via email to discuss things, or Montalon quietly recording internal dialogues and, you know, releasing them, and also taking other people's internally recording dialogues and using them as currency. And the currency is not law, it's access, right? What emerged from the SF 400 letter I sent and the incident was where Jack Hall named me as an evaluator without consent, but I did it. He sent it to me and said, send it, I did. Was a confirmation of how informal power works. It reminded me that anyone watching, that once you have knowledge the system finds inconvenient, you stop being a citizen and start being a liability. If I'd have thought about it, I would have never sent that, because it made me a liability, because I had that record now from his email showing he sent it to me. My involvement was never about law enforcement qualifications, even though I have a lot of educational background in that. It was always about who got to shape the official narrative, how they could use my silence and my knowledge and my background and my license as a tool to legitimacy. And that's what makes these systems dangerous. I trusted them. I believed in them. I loved them. I thought they were doing me right, but I was wrong. Not just the individuals within them, but the networks of deference, and even the plausible deniability. That's everything, right? That surrounds them. Documents are doctored, emails are buried, evaluations are co-authored by people who never signed them. And those tactics fail. The fallback is always the same: silence, discredit, reshuffle. So the question becomes, who else and what else is being managed? What other tapes exist? What other evaluations were ghostwritten? Who else has been named in internal communications without their knowledge or consent? These aren't abstract questions. These go directly to the heart of power and how it functions in Lorain County. And who gets to speak without fear of reprisal? Not me. Because the next segment we get into will continue this theme and dig deeper into suppression, silence, retaliation, function as policy, not aberration. Let me know, because we're going to go forward here. But we're going to see segment 10, the cost of speaking, the price of silence. In Lorain County, there's been this long tradition of protecting institutions at the expense of the truth. But that tradition does not survive on its own. It needs enforcers, deniers, silent co-signers, perhaps more dangerously, those who know better but say nothing. So in this section, we're going to talk about the toll that the silence takes on communities and what it costs to challenge that machinery and secrecy. Amber Bronish, the daughter of Nancy Smith, embodies that long-term generational cost of injustice. For decades, she watched her mother fight to clear her name, while the same local infrastructure that engineered the prosecution continued to flourish untouched. Judges moved on, prosecutors were promoted, some became defense attorneys, some got shot in the back by their sons because they realized they were saw that video. Some stayed in government, yet a few, if any, have ever publicly acknowledged the irreparable harm that Smith and Allen convictions caused. For Amber, the personnel is political and the political is personal. Her presence in this story is not symbolic, it's evidentiary. She's the living embodiment and reminder that the outcomes we call historic are still actively hurting people in the present, including her mom. My own experience has mirrored that reality in unexpected ways. From the moment I began investigating public records, challenging closed doors votes, and requesting transparency from the city and county officials, I became a target of the very systems I had once trusted to protect citizens, and I actually protected. I worked in those systems. I was included in the letters I never approved. I've been described in legal filings I had never seen, and I've been portrayed as an agitator rather than a journalist or a social worker. But here's the truth: retaliation isn't accidental. It's a feature of the system. And it's meant to remind you and me that questioning power has a cost. And that cost is isolation, distortion, and attempts at professional ruin and possibly taking your license. Not just about me, although it centers a lot on me. It's about every public employee who ever tried to speak up or speak out and was threatened into silence, every department head who was forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement, every resident who asked too many questions and was quietly sidelined. It's about the normalization of retaliation as administrative routine. And it's about the system's ongoing investment in making sure that silence is always the safer option, folks. And we understand that the cost of speaking out is not evenly distributed. Some people, because of race, class, gender, or employment status, are punished more harshly than others for the same words. That's just fact. That's part of the calculus used by institutional actors. They don't just ask, hey, is he telling the truth? They ask, can we afford to let him? And when someone's deemed unaffordable, when their own voice threatens that equilibrium of long practice, power, structure, the full weight of that institutional resistance brought to bear. Not with overt attacks, right? They didn't come after me overtly, but with bureaucratic gestures, denied requests, missing files, delayed records. Suddenly, you're not a whistleblower, you're a troublemaker. They've done this to me. A political liability, an angry critic. That's how systems of the local power sustain themselves. A vexatious requester. Not by out-arguing their critics, right? Or outsmarting them or educating them, but by marginalizing them until they burn out or go quiet. I don't do either. And that's why this podcast exists, to speak to places where silence has been mandated, to document the connections where others have been erased, and to remind the people of Lorain County that you're not crazy, you're not alone, and you're not powerless. That brings us to segment 11. We're getting close to the end here, folks. And this section is budgets, bids, and backroom shields. In this segment, we're going to dig close to the most unreported but crucial mechanisms of institutional self-preservation in Lorain County, municipal budgets, and the legal contracts that follow them. These are not just administrative decisions, they're power statements. They reveal who gets protected, who gets paid, and whose silence is being purchased. So we're going to get in that next part here after our next quick ad break. Hey there, folks. Here at Unplugged with Aaron Knapp, we like a good beef just as much as the next guy. And all jokes aside, a good beef is a good beef, and I'm not going to have a cow about it. Here at Unplugged, we can actually appreciate the drive behind a good media beef. Debate gets eyeballs, folks. Friction gets engagement. And let's be honest, sometimes a little tension is just good for the ratings. So if you're looking for more coverage of the Nancy Smith case, and if you want to hear commentary supporting Amber Bronish, or if you want to hear clips from my own podcast, rebroadcast and discussed at length, sometimes in episodes that are almost entirely and seemingly about me, then I am going to send you directly over to the Madhouse podcast, the Madhouse Bar Talk. Yes, seriously, folks, this is a real ad. Unpaid sponsorship. Their mentions have probably driven my views way ahead, and rather than pretend otherwise, I'm going to return the favor by giving them free ad space during tonight's show. No animosity, no drama, just media reality. Now, for clarity's sake, and because I actually care about, the things and doing things the right way, I am not using any of their copyrighted images. I am not playing clips from their podcast. That is intellectual property, and in Ohio, if I did that improperly, they could definitely sue me. I am not interested in that, and if you do not believe me, look it up. So, if you want their content, go directly to the source. Head on over to the Madhouse Bar Talk at YouTube at youtube.com/@Madhouse Bar Talk. That's MAHDHOUSEBARTALK. And that's where you will find more Amber Bronish, more Nancy Smith coverage, and yes, more commentary involving yours truly. Although I would ask moving forward, and I will say this once and only calmly, I do ask that my intellectual property not be reused without permission. That does not stop anyone from criticizing me, discussing me, or disagreeing with me. I fully support that. But I do have a right to tell my story, just as they have clearly told theirs. That's it. That's the statement. No feud, no meltdown. No cows were harmed in the making of this ad. Now back to Unplugged. Moo. Hey there, folks. Here.
Oh my God, I love
that. Moo. All right. Let's close this thing down. We're getting close to the end. I know it's getting long. I want to go do something else too. But the truth has to be told, and it's Saturday night. What else are we going to do? Go out and get beat up? So let's start with the City of Lorain's handling of legal defenses for its officials named in Nat via City of Lorain. The pattern's clear. So, wait, hold on. Yeah, we're right there. When public officials like former police chief James McCann and the assistant law director Joseph Leck were sued personally under federal civil rights laws, by yours truly, the city didn't follow a transparent or a competitive process for appointing their defense counsel. Instead, in separate moves, city leaders, two of them, some of which who are the actual defendants themselves, the only two, they approved taxpayer funds for contracts for private attorneys. Now, these contracts were not subjected to open bidding. They were not, meaningful public explanations. No disclosure of how the city evaluated the scope of duty, liability exposure, because I asked for it, or legal strategy. I asked a lot of departments if they did any of this. They said nothing, just silence. And then they voted in the Board of Control, which was just Bradley and Carrion, both co-defendants, to approve it. Public funds, 10 grand, 5 and 5. So these votes did not merely provide legal representation. They served to shield co-defendants with city resources in a case alleging personal misconduct. The same actors who approved these payments, Mayor Jack Bradley and Safety Service Director Ray Carrion, are also themselves named in that suit. Now, I could be wrong because I'm not a lawyer, but I've been told by some smart ones that this is a conflict that is not out of theory, but of law. Ohio Revised Code 102.03 D and E do not permit any public official to approve contracts that benefit other defendants in cases where their impartiality is compromised. Yet that's exactly what they did. No recusal, no independent legal ethics review, no public debate. Now, it's not about whether McCann or Levesque deserve legal defense. Of course they do. Everyone does. But personal capacity lawsuits under 1983 are not city liability matters. And unless the official or an official was clearly acting within the scope of their job duties, in both cases, no public document has established such a scope of determination. Instead, the city acted first and explained never. And they picked attorneys who were not just any defense lawyers, but they were part of the same political ecosystem, at least in McCann's case, because it was Rosenbaum. For Levesque, it's another attorney. I'm not sure what their ties to the political structure of Lorain are, but I'm sure I'll find out at some point. But it didn't seem like much because they were quite mad at Lorain for even asking for their socials and all this stuff because they wanted them to actually be charged taxes in Lorain. They're like, fuck off. We're not paying you taxes. We don't work there. We're helping you. The larger problem in all this is the legal defense contracts have become a back channel for method of reconciling or reallocating public funds for private protection. There is no legal requirement in Ohio that a city must pay for a personal defense in every instance. In fact, most cities conduct some sort of an internal or third-party review before approving any such expenditures. And that didn't happen here. They didn't give a shit. And that absence of oversight reveals the troubling truth in Lorain County and Lorain City. The power to approve a budget line item has been converted into the power to shield allies from exposure. It's not just about who gets the money. It's about who doesn't. Whistleblowers, critics, fired employees, Middlebrooks, and public records requesters are routinely told that resources are tight. Can't do it. That the city can't process something fast enough because, money's tight. There's no bandwidth for that. We can't fix that. We can't replace that. We can't give you video of your city council meetings. But suddenly, when the powerful insiders sued, suddenly these motherfuckers got money out the yin-yang, right? There's money all over the table. It's like you in a strip club full of a bunch of people that don't know what money is. And they just said, give these green things to those girls if you like what they're showing you. Suddenly, that legal defense is a priority, right? It's easy to overlook how dangerous this can be, and it is. But it doesn't come with flashing lights. It comes in PDF contracts, city minutes, finance department requisitions. But make no mistake, folks, this is how secrecy is funded. It's not just through non-disclosure agreements or confidential settlements, but through the quiet, repeat use of public resources to insulate individuals who have power from facing public accountability. Now, when you ask too many questions, when you dig too deep, when you're met with procedural fog, closed records, or retaliatory posturing, that's the cost of asking where your tax dollars really go. It's also the reason why we're going to keep asking. And in the next segment, we're going to explore how the Lorain County Prosecutor's Office handled that Barilla public records case and how that battle over one settlement exposed the fault lines that are still shaking these institutions, right? Barilla's records case, it was a fragile facade of transparency. The story of Barilla v. Tomlinson began back as a simple public records request that simply spiraled into a high-stakes clash over institutional transparency and the right to know, right? At the center of it was attorney James Barilla, longtime Lorain County figure, who filed a suit to compel the release of the records related to a $100,000 settlement paid to former county employee, or, J.D. Tomlinson's employee, Jennifer Battistelli. What made the case explosive was not the payout itself, but was the effort to keep the records hidden. Now, Barilla's petition alleged that Lorain County officials, included then J.D. Prosecutor Tomlinson and Chief Assistant Prosecutor Dan Petticord, failed to comply with the Ohio Public Records Act by refusing to release emails, drafts, and other communications tied to the Barilla settlement. The case, filed in 2024, did not merely seek documents. It exposed a deep tension between the public rights to transparency and the institutional reflex to protect insiders. And at stake was more than just a single matter. The Battistelli settlement, initially processed under a vague contractual language, instead of like a traditional legal resolution, it was approved absent of any visible review by Corsa, the county's insurance consortium. Their internal metadata later showed that a payment was inserted into the requisition documents at the 11th hour, but the handling reeked of bureaucratic maneuvering designed to limit public scrutiny, and it worked for a time. Then that veil began to lift. Barilla demanded records explaining the process. He wanted to know who authorized the payout. He wanted to know why it was processed off the book. He wanted to know what roles various officials played. He wanted his suit named Tomlinson, Petticord, and the Board of Commissioners. Now, at the time, Rosenbaum, despite his more prominent association with law enforcement defense, appeared for Barilla. It was a notable shift. Here was the same Jonathan Rosenbaum who had months earlier been, who months later was retained to represent McCann in a federal civil rights lawsuit, was now, in this case, suing county officials over transparency. The irony's thick, folks. Rosenbaum, a lawyer whose career has been shaped by prosecuting official actors from exposure, was now positioned to be an advocate for public access. But he's done that a lot if you look at his record, I think. But the deeper implication of this is the duality is that Rosenbaum's presence often signals not ideological alignment, but strategic unity. When a case involves protecting entrenched authority, limiting reputational damage, or controlling the flow of sensitive information, Rosenbaum's your guy. He's the guy that's in the room. Whether defending or compelling disclosure, the goal remains the same: navigate the institutional risk and keep it quiet. Barilla's suit highlighted the systematic rot, the ease of which public offices can deny, delay, or dodge record obligations, especially when the content could reflect poorly on elected officials or their allies. Petticord, who advised commissioners during the Battistelli matter, found himself named in a suit seeking to undo the very secrecy he once helped construct. That he actually continued to hold a county position at Job and Family Services while litigation unfolded speaks volumes to how little fallout the inner circle actually had to face. The Barilla case is actually symbolized on a broader pattern emerging across Lorain County. When internal missteps become public, blame is distributed selectively, right? Well, Tomlinson became a lightning rod for the criticism and institutional exile by yours truly and others. Others with deeper involvement, like Petticord, retained status and employment. Now, for the record, I did make Petticord just as much a victim, a villain, as well as Resendez as JD. I wasn't focused just on JD. I realize now I should have been more focused on Petticord and Resendez, but hindsight's 2020. But in that context, Barilla's efforts to expose the inner workings of the settlement served not only as legal action, but as a kind of a moral audit. I wasn't against that. We need to know no matter what. Question is still, who figured it all out? It sounds like one man was puppeteering all that shit, and that was Petticord. But the courts have yet to fully resolve this matter, right? The litigation's already pulled back the curtain on the political culture that treated the transparency as a threat, not as that principle that's supposed to be there. But whether the emails are ultimately released or not, whether the public has now seen, determined the county was able to keep them sealed, more than anything, that confirms the need for sustained pressure, right? Public vigilance and a willingness to confront the architecture of secrecy that still defines too much of Lorain County and its governments. And that's where we get with the fallout of the exposure in segment 11 and the cost of persistence. As the story continues to unfold, the legal dust refuses to settle. it becomes increasingly clear that Lorain County's institutional architecture is less than a machine of justice, more a network of self-preservation. Every request for transparency, every attempt to pry open sealed documents and records of publication or public action is met with not just procedural delay, but with an orchestrated response aimed to discredit the questioner, the requester, and protecting the circle. The dynamic's not theoretical. It's played out in real time. The Battistelli settlement, the hiring of Jonathan Rosenbaum for McCann, the strategic denials of public records, the resistance to disclosing who knew what and when. All these point to a system where exposure is treated like betrayal. The public servants tasked with accountability often function as more stewards of insulation than advocates of truth. Those who ask questions find themselves isolated, just like Aaron Knapp did. And when I began pressing for these records, these filings, these campaign connections, these inconsistencies, the response was not clarity. It was containment. Efforts were made to box me and portray the scrutiny as personal or political rather than public-minded. And yet the records continued to speak, louder than the deflections, louder than the ass whippings, louder than the bar beatings. The web of connections grew more visible, and so did the links it took to obscure it. These revelations did not indicate or indict a single person or department. They expose an ecosystem, one that's loyalty is often more rewarded than lawlessness or lawfulness. More than being lawful, because that's where insiders circulate from one role to the next, and that's where institutional memory is often used not to correct errors, but to prevent their discussion. The system learns, and it doesn't evolve. It adapts, it reshapes, it closes ranks, and effectively and efficiently, with each new branch of its parameter, it protects itself. So what comes next, folks? That's the big, difficult question. The courts may continue their slow churn. Some cases will end with settlements. Others may be stalled or dismissed. Some actors will eventually leave office, but most will remain. And because that's power in Lorain County is not just held, it's passed down, protected, and rarely punctured by consequence. But the record now exists. The podcast, these documents, the investigation, they all form part of a living archive that refuses to let the past be buried. Whether in a courtroom or a council chamber, the question is no longer whether these patterns exist. The question is what we as citizens are willing to do about them. What are you as citizens willing to do about them? Because ultimately the power that fears scrutiny is not the power at all, right? It's weakness cloaked in formality. The only way to confront it is to drag it into the light. Sunlight, baby. Over and over and over again, until that system will either change or admits that it never will. All right, that brings us to segment 12, one of our last segments here, political gravity and the ghost of old cases, and we're going to talk about that. And hey there, folks. If you really want to know what's happening in your hometown, the place to go is Lorain Daily and Vermilion Daily. From city council and school boards to local businesses, community events, and neighborhood stories, these outlets cover what the big media ignores. This is hyper-local news for real people in real communities. Visit Lorain Daily and VermilionDaily.com today. Read it, share it, support local journalism, because your community deserves coverage that actually lives here. Hey there. All right, guys. We're back up here, section 12. Political gravity and the ghosts of these old cases, right? Lorain County political gravity does not work like it does elsewhere. Here, that trajectory of a public figure rarely holds obscurity or disqualification. It doesn't end that way. More often than not, it curves back to influence. It brings them back around again and again and again. Perhaps under a new title, perhaps wearing a new badge like Petticord, or maybe you hold a new office. Unless you're J.D. Tomlinson. But always orbiting that, or maybe Michelle Hahn, or any of your outcasts, right? Any of your scapegoats. But always orbiting that same center of power. It's always the same people. They never leave. It's the same system. It rarely lets them fall. And if it does, it's throwing one of them under the boat. And they're still going to support them outside, usually, unless they're pariahs. That system, reinforced over decades, doesn't run on formal policy. or oversight procedurally. It runs on memory, fear, loyalty, the calculated rewriting of history. You can see in the gravitational pull of how often the same names reappear: Rosenbaum, Petticord, Bradley, Carrion, Hall, Tesalito. I could go on. These are not just officials or attorneys or office holders. They're nodes in a structure that recycles authority. They move between branches of government, between legal matters, and between public crises. The surface in contact and contract, like in contract votes, right? In confidential emails. They show up in last minute filings and on political finance disclosures, and their proximity to power is never incidental, it's institutional. That's why Smith and Allen's case, nearly 30 years old, it still matters. Because its legacy didn't die in court. It metastasized like a cancer into every branch of the county's legal system. It influenced prosecutorial habits, their policing culture, their judicial discretion, and even how the media was handled. More often than that, or more than that, it actually taught everyone involved a lesson. Not about justice, not about accountability, right? But about survival. The lesson was never admit fault. The lesson was circle the fucking wagons. Protect the institution at all costs, even if it means sacrificing the truth. And above all else, make sure your friends stay close. That's how we arrive at these contradictions that we've uncovered in this season and this whole session. A county that still employs a Dan Petticord despite his multiple roles in conflicting matters. A city that quietly pays Jonathan Rosenbaum to be defendant, co-defendant without any clear legal justification. A prosecutor's office that spends years resisting transparency only to implode publicly when one of its own, J.D. Tomlinson, decides to pull back the curtain. And even now, as lawsuits unfold and records are released, the institutions don't disavow the behavior, they double down. Then they shift the narrative. They call it normal. Hey, but the public isn't blind, at least not anymore. People remember when James McCann was still chief. They remember when Jack Bradley and Ray Carrion first took office. They remember the promises of reform from Jack Hall and Silla, the language of accountability, their performative ethics committees. They recall what they see now has always been there. A governing class that protects itself first every time. It's personal for me, yeah, because I lived it. I didn't just report these cases. I dug through the records. I received the emails. I listened to the depositions, the whisper campaigns, the veiled threats. I saw firsthand how information was controlled, how certain narratives and names were scrubbed from the filings, how others were elevated depending on the narrative. And at every turn, the ghosts of Smith and that prosecution would resurface, not just in the legal filings, but in the psychology of the system, in the way that challenges to authority were handled, in the way that troublemakers like me and Garen and others and Bob and anyone else along the way were talked about in closed-door meetings. And that's why political gravity looks like what it looks like when it's weaponized, right? It's not just people that like Rosenbaum or Petticord to keep playing influential roles. It's that the rest of the system moves to make sure they do. They're designed to do that. The people that are willing to be the frontliners. That checks and balances are treated as optional. That the public trust is treated as expendable, and the transparency is treated as liability, right? Oh yeah, the ghosts are still there. They are just embedded in the architecture. They are woven into the relationships between the prosecutor's office, the county commissioners, and the judges and the media. And they are what make the machine keep running, even when they feel a scandal, silence, or complicity. And as we transition, I want to keep one thing in mind. The system in Lorain County does not fear exposure. It fears disruption. It fears people who keep asking questions long after the headlines fade. It fears records. It won't stay sealed. It fears public that remembers. And we will remember. Because, Petticord, the utility player in all of this, is like the big player in the county's chessboard. You won't understand how the county's legal machinery operates. And when it thinks no one's looking, you don't have to look any further than Dan Petticord. For a decade, Petticord's functioned less like a traditional legal advisor and more like a roving institutional fixer. He's a utility player who shifts positions like a shortstop to first, to infield, depending on what narrative the county needs to maintain. whose assignments never seem to conflict out, right? When even clearly they should. It starts with his tenure as chief assistant prosecutor for Tomlinson. And then in that capacity, he doesn't just supervise assistants or coordinate policy. He was the central legal figure in settlement approvals, legal reviews, and the public's messaging around certain high-stake cases. And when the controversial Battistelli payout emerged, he quietly processed by the county in a way that skirted Corsa and insurance reviews and other procurement requirements. Petticord's name was all over this, not JD's, not Burge's, not even anybody on the other side. None of the commissioners, not Michelle Hong, not Dave Moore. I mean, a little bit of Dave Moore, but it was all Petticord. He told JD how to protect himself. He told the commissioners how to pay it out. And in reality, he told everyone what the script, blueprint, whatever you want to call it was. It was all Petticord. And again, it was typical Petticord legal advice. Bad. I mean, listen, if I had the choice between asking my child, who lies a lot to me, legal advice, or Dan Petticord, I think I might ask Clarity. Just saying. Because Petticord is not a passive participant. He helped shape the legal justification behind the structure of all this payout. He was directly involved in the effort to keep the terms of what the settlement sealed was from the public. And when attorney Tom Barilla filed suit to compel disclosure of the records related to the Battistelli settlement, Petticord appeared on the other side, representing the commissioners and the prosecutor's office and defending their secrecy on a decision he made. So in one breath, he's part of the machinery that authorizes the deal, and in the next, he's the attorney arguing in the court that no one should be allowed to see how it was done. Don't look at what I did. Come on. But that is the end of his utility, because not long after, he's no longer with the prosecutor's office because JD leaves, and he gets moved, Petticord gets moved to a new role, this time administrator of Lorain County Job and Family Services, where there was no public announcement, no explanation of how a man at the center of so many controversial legal decisions and a lawyer quietly became a civil service leader in an entirely different department, just as before he moved without disruption, as through accountability was never a part of the equation, right? And the people there are getting paid nothing. He has no experience in child and family services, none whatsoever. But what makes his role especially insidious is that it's invisible to the public. His name rarely appears in the news headlines. He doesn't campaign except for when he ran for judge and he lost. He doesn't give interviews. His legal fingerprints are on every document that matters, from contract approvals to internal memos, from ethics opinions to litigation strategies. His role is not that of ideologue or even that of politician, even though he ran. He is the legal scaffolding that holds up the institution regardless of what way the wind blows. Yeah, sure, he ran, but that's just because I feel like he was reaching outside, reaching for his stars. He should have known better. That's not where you live. You live in this secret world, right? And perhaps that's why you remain so valuable to the people in power even after you ran, because you don't challenge the system, Petticord. You enable it. You adapt it to your needs and their needs. You put your name on whatever justification is required to keep the walls from falling in. Whether it's covering a payout, defendant secrecy, or quietly transition into a new role, you show that in Lorain County, loyalty is paid more and matters more than optics. Optics matter more than legality. To be clear, no one's saying Petticord broke the law, right? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying this story illustrates how fragile the line is between legal cover and institutional complicity. And how easy it is for one person to become everywhere and everyone at once, writing the policies, defending the decisions, avoiding the conflict, even without ever being held accountable. Petticord was part of all of that. He made the decision. He defended the decision. I mean, for God's sakes, how much more could he get involved? He's not a public official in the traditional sense, but he's part of the architecture. He's the kind of actor whose name gets mentioned in emails, not in press releases, whose opinions shape outcomes even when his job titles change. What is he now? Does anybody know? What does he do? He ain't the face of power, but he's the muscle. And for a county grappling with that of years of litigation, secrecy, slow-moving reform, that should terrify anyone paying attention, especially considering what he did with Jeffy recently by giving him legal advice when he wasn't legally able to. But that's why they kept him, right? We just happened to catch him once in email. Somebody actually saw the email he wrote, and we got it. We asked for it. So ask yourself this: who benefits when that same person is always in the room, even when the role shifts? And who loses when that kind of institutional muscle goes unchallenged, right? Commissioners? I don't know. Feels like it, because that erasure of accountability and the myth of institutional reform, right? If Lorain County has proven anything over the last 5 years, the institutional memory is selective. Accountability is treated like more of a public relations slogan than a governing principle. The scandals come, the players rotate, the headlines fade, and yet beneath it all, the same structures remain intact. The same names keep reappearing. And the public's supposed to believe that this reshuffling of job titles somehow constitutes reform? Come on, guys. Like, consider the aftermath of this Betticelli settlement, the broader collapse of the confidence in the prosecutor's office. When Tomlinson was forced out under the weight of the political pressure and losing the election, document leaks and internal backlash, and Jennifer Battistelli herself giving out selective recordings that were meant to cause damage, it was sold to the public as a cleansing movement, right? We're going to fix it all. The system was correcting itself. Everything was going to give it right back on thing. But the old guard would be reevaluated, and that's not what happened. What actually followed was a quiet continuity, right? The kind that only someone who's been watching closely would notice. Tomlinson staffed many who were directly involved in the decisions that he made and advising him on the strategies that are now under fire remain in place, right? Dan Petticord laterally moved into a civil service role in the Job and Family Services. Other internal actors from that period continued with little disruption, absorbing the fallout like institutional shock observers like Pluto or Zamba or any of these people, right? There's no independent review, no review of how the office handled sealed settlements or crafted dubious legal justifications, no public reckoning at all. No check to see if any of these people were backdooring JD. Even more telling is how Tony Silla steps in and goes, not as a neutral steward, but as an active participant in reasserting the old order. Silla's 2025 motion to vacate the exoneration of Nancy Smith and Joseph Allen sent a clear signal. Whatever political dust had settled around the Head Start case, the county's position had not changed. The machine still believed in its own righteousness, and it cannot tolerate contradiction, even if it means disinterring decades of legal ghosts. Why now? Why go after the only prosecutor, Tomlinson, who showed the institutional courage to admit legal error, to grant a new trial, who was going to pursue like a motion that is less than legal necessity and than historical, revisionism, so to speak, to make it again different story. That answer is ugly as it is obvious, because control matters most when more than justice. Because once someone punctures the illusion of prosecutorial infallibility, what happens is the entire structure begins to tremble, and the system, sensing this, lashes out in the only way it can. It lashes out at the dissenter, the person causing the problems. Just like white blood cells attack the invader. So much of this comes back to the image of management. It's not about winning cases. It's about preserving reputations, insulating alliances, and controlling the narrative. That's why figures like Rosenbaum keep coming back to the pivotal moments, and they're brought back. That's why people like Petticord are never truly gone, because what's at stake isn't just a legal battle. It's the county's ability to maintain the illusion that it polices itself. And for those who try to shine the light on those patterns, like me, Garen, or anyone else, those are the costs. I know it firsthand. I'm a plaintiff in Nat v. City of Lorain. I see how this machinery reacts when challenged. I've reported on it. I've lived it. I've watched the city quietly hire Rosenbaum to defend McCann without ever explaining why. I've watched them lock arms, protect each other, and behave as if it's accountability and something that happens to be other people. But it's not reform when the same people rotate chairs. It's not accountability when the only one punished is the man who told the truth, me. That's, people go, why are you mad? Well, I don't have a job. Why do you have so much time on your hand? I don't have a job. Why? James McCann. But arguably, who doesn't have a job also? James McCann. So, eye for an eye, right? It's not justice when motions are filed to uphold the law but rewrite history. The legacy of that machine and the gatekeepers of that narrative at the heart of Lorain County's institutional resilience is what I call the legacy machine. It's not structural, built on transparency, public service, or ethical rigor. It's built on relationships, silence, and the careful curation of memory. It functions by rewriting history in real time, making critics look unstable, dissenters look disloyal, and its errors appear isolated, harmless, and abnormalities and anomalies in the system. It's not for those mistakes are never admitted. It's that the story of these mistakes are always managed and softened in a way that they're sort of divorced from the people who caused them. And there's no better example of this than what happened when I began uncovering records, inconsistencies, contradictions behind the Smith and Allen prosecutions, when, as reporting a project evolved into a collision course with the very system I was investigating. Because in Lorain City, journalism and litigation are not welcome tools for civic correction. They are threats to be managed, undermined, and ignored. I was never supposed to connect with Amber. She's Nancy Smith's daughter. Our paths crossed because we refused to stop asking questions, even when those questions pointed directly at the architects of the county's legal, fiction. Though Amber and I came to understand that what happened to Nancy was not just prosecutorial overreach or courtroom failure, it was systematic, it was political, and it was perpetrated across decades through the deliberate refusal to challenge legacy actors like Jonathan Rosenbaum. Now, what people outside the county don't understand is how tightly these levers of narrative control are being held. Rosenbaum's not just a lawyer, he's a signal. He reappears in pivotal cases, whether defending McCann or pressing public record suits, telegraph a broader institutional message. We don't forget our own. Whether or not he officially represented Jennifer Battistelli, rumor has it he signed some paperwork to make it look like he did, and whether or not he had a role in the decision or shield to release the settlement documents, whether his presence is there or not, it's always been strategic. He's summoned when the stakes are not just legal but political. He's summoned when the record needs managing. And then there's Petticord, wearing multiple hats across multiple administrations, advising commissioners one day and then reappearing in unrelated litigation the next. His role is in the Varela matter and trying to stop the paperwork from being released, all while, everything his role in the matter with Tomlinson. Simultaneously resisting disclosure while actually having previously represented, I don't even know, the whole thing is just crazy. It puts transparency in an effort. It captures exactly how these murky waters and how murky they are. It's not always about breaking laws. Sometimes it's about making sure no one ever has to answer for how close they got to the line before they actually didn't step over it, but got real close. The public sees the surface, a settlement here, a retirement there, a contract awarded, a motion filed, a judge ruling. But beneath it all is the machinery built to sustain itself, not a service of justice, not to expose wrongdoing, but to endure. That's why my story, the lawsuit, right? Nat v. City of Lorain is not just about what happened to me. It's about what happens to anyone who tries to pull back the curtain, and why it's the legacy machine keeps responding so fiercely when someone like me tries. The message is clear. We control the record. We control the rules. And if you challenge that, we're going to close ranks. But the one thing, and one of the most important things I've learned through all of it was through litigation, journalism, and confrontations, that Lorain County, the record itself, and the battleground is not merely a chronicle of events or a place where truth lives. It's contested terrain. It is a thing. It is a thing to be massaged, delayed, redacted, or buried. And that's exactly why public records are so central to the kind of work I do and others do, and why that kind of resilience is important, and why that resistance is so difficult that I face. Look no further than the saga surrounding the Battistelli settlement. It was a six-figure payoff, and quietly processed, conflicting explanations offered at different times. The county commissioners claimed it was an employee contract adjustment rather than a legal settlement. Petticord, once legal architect behind the commissioner's approach to it all, and JD's approach to it all, such as documents, helped framed it in that way, on both sides of the fence. The metadata, however, told a different story, showing that the payout was altered at the time and last minute, and reclassified to dodge oversight from Corsa, the county's insurance consortium. That discrepancy is not clerical. It's deliberate. When records are manipulated, just like what they did in Lorain with Ray Carrion, when legal advice is retrofitted to justify decisions already made, it's not incompetence. It's policy. It's the quiet default of institutions that prioritize insulation over truth. And in the grand scheme of things, it's not just settlement records. It's arrest records, internal emails, executive session notes, requisitions, employment files. I've had to fight for all of it, sometimes through public records requests, sometimes in court, sometimes simply through the persistence of printing it out, reviewing the footnotes, and refusing to let the paper trail be ignored, because the paper trail matters. That's why my reporting, my litigation, my podcast all return to documents every time. I don't need to speculate. I don't need people to see what's already there. I need you to just read it. When I confronted the City of Lorain over Rosenbaum's contract with McCann, I didn't get asked questions. I filed. I pulled the vote logs. I requested the justification memos. None were produced. I submitted requisition reviews. I showed there were no competitive bids, no scope of duty evaluation, no documentation indicating that McCann should ever have been eligible for taxpayer funding counsel. It was a handshake deal passed amongst friends and recorded in the bland county language or city language of municipal bookkeeping. And when I dug into Barilla's suit, I saw Rosenbaum represent him again on a transparency claim, while Petticord, who had previously advised, the county on all these matters, was now involved with withholding the very records. It wasn't just irony; it was method. It was the system corrects itself, its course when it's challenged. Never punishes the navigators. Now, even as this podcast is running, the record's being curated. People are whispering about who leaked what, who met with who might be retaliated against for speaking out. The paper trail doesn't stop because I'm reporting on it. In some ways, it becomes more elaborate, more guarded, and more sanitized. And here's what I know. When a system treats its own documentation as a liability, the system is telling you that everything you need to know, that it uses silence as a strategy. And it's taken the last 2 years that have taught me anything. It's taught me silence is not just absence of information in Lorain County. It's strategy, it's planned, it's cultivated, it's deployed. Officials stall. They don't respond to requests or records. They fail to comment. They cite ongoing litigation while privately strategizing. And when they do speak, it's crafted. Ambiguity, designed to reveal as little as possible, because in Lorain County and Lorain City, the public silence is often the loudest form of protection. Take a city like Lorain, whose refusal to publicly justify its vote to fund McCann's defense. They didn't provide a legal memo. They didn't actually explain why the law department was handled. They just gave out some stupid-ass statement about how we're going to be great now in our little mission statement that Raleigh put out. They didn't attempt a fig leaf of due diligence, not a green leaf of the Smith case, right? When others asked, when the answers are bureaucratic theater, when Bob asked, when Garen asked, deflections, delays, redactions, redirections. But behind the curtain, they know what's coming. They know the optics of using public money to fund a co-defendant's legal counsel. They just don't care because they don't think anyone would call it out like me. And for a long time, they were right. The same strategic silence played out over the Bastille settlement. The public wasn't informed. I went and dug for that, as well as Berea and Rosenbaum. The structure of the payout was concealed, but I went and dug for that. The Corsa never reviewed it. That's how I learned about Corsa and the insurance companies for the city. And when scrutiny finally arrived, the explanation shifted, and what became an internal HR issue morphed into more contract clarification, and then the actual retroactive justification finally became the refusal to engage altogether. Petticord, who helped construct the payout framework, right? He helped do it, has since moved on to administrative role at Job and Family Services, still within the same institutional orbit, still operating without formal accountability. Meanwhile, people like Sillo keep pushing to undo Smith's exoneration not because there's new evidence, but because the case has been relitigated, maybe. No, but because admitting fault threatens the equilibrium, right? It challenges the myth that the system corrects itself, that prosecutors act in good faith, and that decade-old institutions are unfortunate errors rather than institutional design. And while all this unfolds, a disturbing number of people of the same actors area remain in power or close to it. They don't explain. They don't apologize. They just survive through silence. And the question is not whether the wrongdoing occurred. It's whether the public will ever get an honest answer to the people paid to protect their interest or from them. And that's why I keep reporting. That's why I keep requesting records, filing lawsuits, and procedural podcasts, because silence may be their strategy, but it's not mine. All right, folks. I'm going to take one more break, and then we are in our finale. This is my final closing statement. I'm going to do a quick break. I'm going to take a quick sip of water, and then we're going to take a deep breath, and we're going to close this out at the 3-minute and 9-minute mark. And thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Here's my final ad space of the evening. Thank you very much for watching. Here at Unplugged with Aaron Knapp, we like to thank our sponsors. We have a few unofficial sponsors tonight, and they are definitely not paid sponsorships. I want to throw out there a big thank you to Joseph Jones and Eric Jones of the Lorain Daily and the Vermilion Daily. They have a local news page. You should check them out. They do plenty of great work broadcasting all the news that is the news that you want to have in Lorain and Lorain County. So check them out. Also, please, if you need any legal services, feel free to reach out to Robert Gargas. You can find him listed online. He's a fine attorney and comes highly recommended by yours truly. And last but not least, I want to mention D&C Radio. Please make sure you check out one of the up-and-coming internet hip-hop stations and all of their shows. They put on a lot of shows. You have the Never Outdone show. You also have the Eric Bowen show, Speak Up, Speak Out. So please make sure you guys check them out as well if you're looking for your latest and up-to-date hip-hop artistry. Thank you for tuning in. This has been a non-paid sponsorship brought to you by Unplugged with Aaron Knapp. Here at Unplugged with Aaron Knapp, we like to thank... All right, folks. This is our final section. This is our closing segment. Silence is the cover charge. That's where we're at, folks. Let's cut through every excuse, every spin, every manipulated message, and go straight to the truth. What happened to me? What continues to happen in Lorain County isn't about a bar fight or a grudge. It's about what happens when a reporter refuses to fold, when a social worker refuses to do the wrong thing, when institutional players lose control of their story, and when people in power find out their old strategies of silence, sabotage, and smear work no longer work on someone who has a mic and a memory. That night in the bar, what we talked about was not about a random eruption. It was a message, and it was sent to me. I know it. There were no professional bouncers, no licensed security, no uniformed accountability. There was just friends of the bar, enforcers without titles, and training or decided who belonged and who didn't. These weren't employees acting in any way under a legal authority. They were drinking buddies with loyalty, not liability, carrying out what can only be described as a community-sanctioned takedown. And they didn't just escort me out, they brutalized me, slamming me, dragging me, stomping me, a sustained and wholly unlawful assault carried out by the smug impunity of men who knew they'd be protected. They weren't wrong. No cops were called, no ambulance, no reports were filed by the bar itself. The violence was turned into content, a video gleefully edited. Taking care of business every day, taking care of business, there's a way. It was like some high school pep rally stunt, and it was pushed online to mock the victim, me, and elevate the ego of the man who once used my work. I don't know. They didn't just celebrate it, the violence, they commodified it. They made it part of their brand, and when I dared to challenge that narrative, suddenly I'm the problem, the aggressor, the unstable one. But the video doesn't lie, folks. The audio doesn't lie. The silence from the bar, local officials, former allies who now play neutral, they all tell the same story. They needed me gone, and they thought this would do it. But it's not about a single night out or a single man or even a bar or my beef with them or their beef with me, because it drives posts or calls. It's about understanding. It's about a system. It's about a culture in Lorain County where whistleblowers are harassed, where critics are painted as unstable, and where asking questions get you escorted out by someone's drunk cousin instead of answered by someone with a badge. It's the same county where Rosenbaum gets handed taxpayer money to represent defendants in civil rights cases while simultaneously suing for the county for transparency violations on behalf of another insider. It's the same county where Dan Petticord advises commissioners one week and shows up representing someone else, the prosecutor's office in the next to blow up their secrets, where contracts are awarded with no vetting or no review, just quiet nod from full table of defendants protecting each other's flanks. And let's talk about everything that's happened with me in the madhouse that I've advertised for all that. I'm okay with that. Like, I mean, I'm not even. Our situation is what it is, and they enjoy talking about it. I brought it back up only because I have a right to tell my story and talk about it. I have a right to mention it. I have a right to bring up people, and I have a right to feel a certain sort of way about things because they're all part of this culture of the story. Did Scotty Campana call me? Yeah. Did Tia send others to speak on her behalf after I blocked her? Yes. Jeff Gasselman, others. Campana called me. I get what Tucker's saying. Look, I've never had any interactions with him. So in the grand scheme of things, all the people we're talking about in regards to his bar are not Tucker. Tucker and I have never spoke. I can't have any personal issues with him other than what he said about me, and I don't even care. And it is what it is. That's his opinion. It's like he's allowed to have that. It's America. But it just feels like when Campana called me and Tia sent Castleman to call me, and other people were calling me and all this stuff, it was right after the thing happened at that bar. They felt like coordinated moves that were created like to be plausible deniability, to muddy the waters, to make me look like the problem. Now, here's the difference. I kept the receipts. I saved the calls. I have everything. I documented every message, every incident, every attempt to gaslight me. I mean, even when Gito on the podcast admitted his own family questioned why he didn't intervene when, he just stood over that old man, as they said. He obviously was bothered by it. I get it. I'm not saying I was right. I'm just saying y'all was wrong. You had a responsibility to your patrons to take care of them, and you didn't. Now, I mean, if they want to say I swung first, then how does that explain the earlier hit I took before, I re-entered the bar? They even admitted, they said, oh, he got punched by somebody. If I got punched by somebody, then I didn't throw the first punch. How does that hold up under Ohio's assault statutes? Well, it doesn't. It's just the excuse they tell themselves to sleep at night, and that's fine. When I brought it up after the election, I get accused of dredging up old drama recently by people I know and care about, and that's fine because that's what they're doing, and they're making my friends and people that I'm friendly with feel that way, and I don't judge them for that because you're allowed to feel that way. But let's ask the honest question: why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't the truth have an expiration date? Why should justice be dictated by campaign cycles? The argument seems to be that talking about what happened to me and by continuing to fight back, I'm somehow unstable again. But that does say, what does that say about the people who stood by, who did nothing, who said nothing, and now want me to play nice so they can avoid uncomfortable truths? Let's talk about legality. Show me the statute that says you can be beaten unconscious by someone with no credentials just because you raised your voice or stayed in a bar. Show me the legal doctrine that allows a bar to subcontract violence to its friends and its patrons and then laugh about it online. Show me the ethical code that excuses Tucker's copyright violations by putting my videos online, mocking me, and then sudden rebrand into a victim of toxicity once I respond in kind. You can't, because there's no legal, moral, or ethical defense for what happened. The only thing left is silence, and the silence is that currency of complicity. I've been, contacted by more people in the last 6 months than my entire reporting career. Castleman, former staffers, burned out insiders, all of them saying the same thing. Be careful, they're coming for you. You don't know how deep this is. But I do, and I always have. Because when you expose the foundation of a crooked house, the whole thing trembles. That's what scares them the most. Isn't that I fought back. It's that I don't stop. I keep going. I keep reporting, I keep documenting, I keep saying the names, I keep saying the case numbers and the dates, and I keep going until the last file's unsealed and the last smear job's uncatalogued. This podcast isn't therapy. It's not looking for likes and friends, although I wouldn't mind follows. It's testimony. And if you followed it, the thread from the first segment, the first moment, then you already know what they fear. It isn't the lawsuits. It isn't the subpoenas. It's daylight. It's what happens when one voice refuses to die down, just like mine, just like Amber's, just like others. Refuses to be bribed or threatened or co-opted, and that's exactly why I'm still here. I'm Aaron Knapp. They tried to take the pen out of my hand. They tried to take the mic off this stand, and they've tried to drag me across the floor into silence. But I got up, I get up, and I keep recording because I've seen the blueprint of corruption in Lorain County, and it looks exactly like this. Not one of them can rewrite what happened, and not one of them can stop what's coming. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight. I'm Aaron Knapp. This has been Unplugged with Aaron Knapp. I thank you guys for being here. Remember, law enforcement, be lawful, not awful. The rest of you guys, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask.